We start with the biggest threat to humanity, not those melons, but this monstrosity making minced meat out of the poor goblins. A few days ago, this monster emerged from an abandoned lab's cryocapsules. It had thick arms, strong legs, and a muscular body. The monster understood what it was but didn't have a name. It used to be a human named Yunos. Now Yunos had become something entirely different, unable to even speak human language. Yunos only remembered joining a gene-enhancing program run by the military. Back then, he was just a new recruit. He had been hesitant at first, but the world was at war, with countries fighting all across the continent. What shocked him now was the current date displayed on a nearby machine, 1872 in the Northern Empire. He had signed up for the experiment when he was 18 back in 1648. That meant he had been asleep in the capsule for 224 years. Looking around, Yunos saw a corpse inside a nearby capsule. He stood in silence, trying to process everything. Questions filled his mind. Why had he been left untouched for so long? What had happened to the Floretic Empire? He also thought about his family, the ones he had left behind. Though his heart grew heavy, he pushed those thoughts aside. Without proof, he couldn't be sure of anything. For now, Yunos decided to leave the facility and see what was outside. He wandered through the dark hallways, noticing more corpses scattered around. Along the way, he found a matchstick. As he moved further, he came across a problem. The gate wouldn't open. It seemed the place had no power. Still, he figured there had to be some kind of backup supply since the capsule had kept him alive for so long. Yunos stood before the thick gate, worried. He knew it was impossible for someone, even like him, to force it open. However, he realized he had turned into a macho monster. Curious about his new strength, he punched the gate. A loud bang echoed through the area, but pain shot through his right arm. He dropped to the floor, clutching it in agony, and let out a painful screech. When he looked at the gate again, he gave it a thumbs up for staying intact. It was better for their homeland that way. Yunos had no choice but to find another way out through the underground facility. The thought of being trapped and dying there terrified him. He didn't want to remain a monster or meet his end in such a place. Frustrated, he lashed out at the thick gate with punches and kicks, but after a while, he stopped. A strange calm washed over him and his mind became clearer. He realized the facility was built to hold creatures like him and withstand their destructive power. If he kept going, he knew his arms and legs would give out before the gate did. He started thinking harder about how to escape. As he clenched his fists, he remembered something important. He had been part of a gene-enhancing experiment. That gave him an idea. He forced his sharp claws into a gap in the gate and pried it open. Suddenly, there was a loud explosion. Yunos concluded that the scientists' experiments had worked. With his new strength, Yunos broke through a wall with a single punch. He kept smashing through walls until he found a chute. Using his claws and strength, he climbed up the wall, determined to get out. When Yunos stepped outside, he felt confused about where he was. He decided to find a high spot to get a better view of the area. While exploring, he realized that not only was his strength enhanced, but his vision was also much sharper. His eyes worked like they had a zoom function, letting him see far away with incredible clarity. But even with his enhanced eyesight, all he could see from the top of a cliff was a vast forest stretching endlessly. He didn't remember any forest like this in the Empire. The thought of what might have happened made him feel sad, but he quickly calmed down, as if nothing had happened. That's when Yunos noticed another strange change in himself. His emotions were being suppressed. This ability kept him from feeling anything that might interfere with combat. At the moment, he found it useful, but he couldn't ignore the horror of what it meant. The scientists had succeeded in turning humans into weapons. Despite this, Yunos made a decision. He jumped off the cliff, landing with a powerful slam, and swore to himself that he wouldn't become a weapon. As he wandered through the area, he came across an airship that looked like it had crash-landed long ago. Inside, everything was destroyed. While searching, he found a flight log and some letters from the northern kingdom of Canaan. The letters confirmed the airship was from Canaan. According to the logs, the airship had been attacked by a monster, which caused it to crash. But the most shocking part, the logs were written 200 years ago. Yunos let out a sigh. This confirmed what he had already suspected. Thankfully, he had mentally prepared himself for such discoveries. Based on the logs, the airship crashed 3 days after leaving Canaan. Judging by the airship's speed and travel distance, Yunos had a rough idea of where he was. Yunos no longer felt hunger, but he still ate some old biscuits he had found. He was worried about not feeling hungry anymore, but decided to keep eating regularly to stay safe. He stepped outside and started walking east. He remembered there was a village nearby and hoped to find people there. Even if it had been destroyed, he thought he might at least discover some useful information. However, if the village was still intact, he knew his monstrous appearance would make things difficult. As he walked, he suddenly stopped. A bad sour smell filled the air and his body reacted without him thinking. He crept through the bushes to find the source. In a clearing, he spotted goblins celebrating with their spoils. He realized they were the same goblins who violate female elves in hentai manga and anime. Yunos was a man of culture just like you, our dear viewer. The strong smell made him feel sick, and he felt sorry for the imaginary elves being used by the goblins. Yunos clenched his fist and stepped out of the bushes. He knew his body was strong, almost superhuman, but he wasn't sure how it would hold up against monsters. The goblins noticed him as he walked toward them with a menacing air. Without hesitation, he threw a single punch so powerful that it created a shockwave, wiping out most of the goblins in one blow. As he continued fighting, Yunos realized something. This wasn't just a fight or a simple battle, it felt like he was creating a nightmare for these goblins. When the fight ended, Yunos had a moment of clarity. He understood that goblins weren't powerful creatures and the fight had turned into a one-sided massacre. Still, he found himself oddly hooked, like he was playing a video game. But when he looked at the blood on his claws, he felt it was all too much to handle. Meanwhile, in a nearby village, a woman named Diera sighed as she asked a man named Lizelle if he had the money. Lizelle replied that completing the task would improve her rating, even if there wasn't any real reward. Diera complained that there was nothing worthwhile left to explore in the area. Lizelle apologized, but it was clear he was distracted, unable to stop staring at Diera's chest. Diera noticed and sighed in frustration. She thought to herself that she might have let him hug her if he were a better man. Just then, Lizelle's sister Lena and another man named Gista joined them. Lena asked Lizelle if he had taken care of exploring the nearby forest. Diera answered for him, saying she didn't even want to hear Lizelle's reasons for going into the great forest of Floratus. Soon after, we see Diera and Lena getting attacked by goblins. Lizelle and Gista were also taken down by the goblins. Diera thought about how everything had gone wrong and blamed her bad luck. The day before, Yunos fought a monster bigger than him. With just one punch, he easily defeated it. He wasn't just testing his strength, he needed food. He cooked the monster's meat over a fire. But when he tried to eat it, it tasted so bad that he threw it all up. He felt sorry for the monster and buried it. He realized he still needed to drain the blood just like humans would do. He wondered if he still had human taste buds. Yunos remembered the day he turned into a monster and lost the ability to speak the human language. Despite this, he decided to keep living. He thought he could still find a way to become human again and meet his sisters or their descendants. His family's bloodline was strong, and even if the empire fell, his sisters must have survived. Yunos had accepted his new monster form, as it wasn't as bad as he thought. He was confident in his skills, but he felt disappointed that he couldn't speak the human language. He really wanted to talk to people. Yunos had to think carefully about which country to move to if the empire really fell. His homeland, the Floretic Empire, was the largest country in the world and had the most advanced technology. It was thanks to their scientific progress that the empire had managed to survive against the 4 other countries. A place with a similar environment was the northern country of Canaan. The Einhell Republic was also a good option, as it was home to elves who worshipped nature. Since monsters were a part of nature, Yunos thought he might be accepted there, but he still had some worries. He had heard that elves knew magic, and Yunos wasn't sure if his body was resistant to it. He also wondered if elves had males, as he could only imagine them as females. The southern country wasn't even an option for Yunos for several reasons. The kingdom of Caesarea in the east was known for its monster hunters called exterminators. In his current body, Yunos would be an easy target for them. For now, Yunos decided to head north toward Canaan to find a town and figure out where he was. He hoped he wouldn't run into any Caesarians, though he quickly realized his words might be a death flag. While Diera and her group were camping, she reminded everyone that they were exterminators. She asked why they were exploiting things instead of hunting. Lizelle told her to relax. Lena remembered that their task was to find something and bring it back, but she wasn't sure what it was. Meanwhile, Gista expressed frustration over the elves taking over the former empire 5 years ago without permission. The group started to wonder if the elves were there to search for something, like a hidden treasure. Diera reminded them that the former empire only had things related to science, and the other countries didn't like science. Seeing everyone so serious, Lena pointed out that they looked like they were having a picnic. Lizelle reminded her how dangerous their job was. Diera then agreed with Lena, calling her brother cold-hearted. She knew Lena was just trying to make things lighter and apologized for being too harsh. Lena said it was fine. Diera called her cute and said she wished Lena were her little sister. Gista then told Lizelle to say something, but Lizelle just stayed quiet. Diera didn't know this would be the last time the 4 of them would have fun together. She didn't realize they had been living so close to danger all along. The next day, Lizelle was hit by a fireball and everyone froze in shock. Lizelle was sent flying into a boulder and crushed. Gister, distracted by what happened to Lizelle, got easily surrounded by goblins and was held down. He tried to escape, but a menacing ogre appeared and crushed him. Lena couldn't do anything as she watched her brother and Gister get obliterated. Diera tried to stay strong, but she couldn't help shaking in front of the goblin army led by the ogre. She had dealt with ogres and goblins before, but the ruined area from the Empire made things harder. Diarra tried to protect Lena and attacked with a fire spell, but a goblin easily blocked her magic with an anti-magic shield. The shield had belonged to Lizelle, and the goblin took it away. Knowing that her magic wouldn't work, Diarra realized they were doomed. Suddenly, goblins attacked Lena. Diarra became distracted, and the rest of the goblins used the chance to attack her too. The goblins started to strip the girl's clothes. Seeing Lena cry out for help made Diarra feel guilty for not being able to protect her. Scared, the two girls looked at each other. Instead of letting the goblins control them, Diarra decided she would end her own life by biting her tongue. Something suddenly appeared with a loud noise. Diarra and the other goblins stopped and stared at the monster that had just shown up. Yunos stood confidently in the middle of the battlefield, and Diarra wondered what kind of monster he was. Yunos looked around and saw the goblins causing trouble for Diarra. The goblins complained about Yunos's trespassing, but Yunos didn't pay attention to them. He was more interested in the melons in front of him. He had come because he smelled goblins but didn't expect to find humans. Among the two men, he noticed one was somehow still alive. He also saw another woman in the group. He grumbled about not being able to see the second woman's melons and pushed away the goblins who were bothering Lena. Confused, Diarra couldn't believe a monster was helping them. She wondered if he was hostile against the goblins. Just then, she saw the goblin shaman from earlier casting a spell. The shaman shot a fireball at Yunos, but it didn't affect him at all. To Yunos, it felt like a tickle. He looked around, found the goblin shaman, and ran over. He grabbed the shaman's head and crushed it like an apple. Diarra, holding Lena, couldn't believe that the same fireball that had killed Lizelle had no effect on this strange monster. Yunos then focused on the ogre, which was leading the goblins. He hadn't noticed it before because he was distracted by the melons in the area, but now he saw the ogre could be a good sparring partner. Up until then, Yunos had only fought lower-level monsters. It felt like the perfect chance to test himself. The ogre suddenly charged at Yunos, swinging its huge wooden club at his head, but the blow didn't even leave a scratch on him. Diarra was shocked because it was a similar attack to the one that had sent Gista flying. She realized they were in an even worse situation now. Meanwhile, Yunos was disappointed. He punched the ogre and sent it flying toward the base of a cliff. Diarra and the goblins watched in shock as blood sprayed from the ogre like a fountain. Yunos followed up by leaping onto the ogre and stepping on its face. The ogre's head crushed easily under his foot. After that, Yunos took care of the remaining goblins. The battle turned into a chaotic mess. He even let out a cute tee-hee as he finished. Then he looked toward the naked women, hoping they wouldn't be scared of him now that they were safe. He couldn't help but cry because he struggled to communicate. As a way to thank them for saving him, Yunos decided to look for something that might help him survive in the future. He searched through Lizelle's body and found a potion and a sword. Diarra was shocked and begged Yunos not to take the sword. She told him to take anything else, but not the sword. However, Yunos couldn't understand her due to language barriers. Realizing that the humans were Caesarians, he remembered the flag he had raised earlier, and knew it would be bad to stay any longer. Diarra tried to stop him because the sword was the proof of their team's existence, but Yunos simply walked away with it. Diarra then understood that monsters would always act like monsters. She vowed to keep chasing Yunos as long as he had the sword. Yunos still didn't understand her and thought she was just being loud and annoying. Since she seemed angry, he quickly left the area. Even so, he couldn't help but notice how beautiful Diarra's melons were. It was too bad they would never meet again. Once again, this clueless protagonist raised another flag. Later that night, Yunos felt regret about his actions. The sword he had taken turned out to be a rare magic sword. It needed magic power to use its special abilities and was very expensive. The sword could even hurt him, but his strong healing ability quickly fixed the damage. Yunos realized the sword must have cost a lot, and he knew he had made a big mistake. He had only wanted to build a friendly relationship with Diarra, but now things had gone terribly wrong. To him, the situation felt hopeless. At the same time, Lena asked Diarra if she was really sure about leaving on her own. Diarra promised to get their sword back and told Lena to wait for her. Crying, Lena hugged her tightly. She was afraid Diarra might end up dying like her brother and Gista had. Diarra couldn't ask Lena to come with her because she didn't want Lena to get hurt or die. Instead, she promised Lena that she wouldn't meet the same fate as the others. Diarra couldn't find the right words to apologize, but she made a decision in her heart. If Lena gave up because of fear of death, Diarra would be different. She swore she would catch Yunos. Yunos was testing how far he could push himself with hunger and sleepiness. He figured he probably couldn't feel either, but he kept trying to force it anyway. To make things worse, the backpack he had grabbed from Diarra's team, filled with potions, was about to fall apart. He realized he needed a bigger backpack, and some salt to make his meals better. As he thought about it, he realized there were lots of things he wanted. He decided to search for them if he found a town. By dawn, he arrived at a town, but it was completely abandoned. While exploring, he noticed some anti-aircraft guns. These weapons were the pride of the Floretic Empire since they could easily take down flying monsters. However, they were also the reason other countries started wars with the Empire, as the monsters would flee into their lands instead. The town didn't have tall walls but had even more anti-aircraft guns, so Yunos figured it must have been an inner town. He checked the faded signs around him and realized he was in the northeastern part of the town called Ilquel. From here, he had two options. Head northwest to Luke Dill, which was near Canaan, or go east to the former military base of Karnash. At least now he knew where he was. Just when Yunos was about to continue exploring, he caught a familiar foul smell from somewhere nearby. He immediately recognized it as the stench of goblins and wished they would just disappear forever. Dropping his backpack, he sprinted toward the source of the smell. The goblins, who were busy playing with a skull like it was a ball, froze in shock when they saw a massive creature charging straight at them. Yunos attacked them fiercely, leaving no chance for them to fight back. As the chaos unfolded, he noticed a few goblins running away together in the same direction. This was unusual since goblins normally scattered when escaping. Yunos realized there was something ahead they were trying to reach. When he moved to strike again, he noticed the goblins acting in a strange, coordinated way. This made him suspect that someone, or something, was giving them orders. It also seemed like they were guarding something. Looking around, Yunos spotted a school campus nearby. He guessed that the gymnasium, being large enough, might have become their hideout. Yunos rushed into the campus, the stench growing stronger with each step. As he entered the gymnasium, he came face to face with a massive, bloated female goblin. It let out a loud shriek, startled by his sudden arrival. Yunos quickly recognized the creature as the Goblin Queen. Goblins sometimes used other races to reproduce, but most of the breeding was done by the queen herself. He noticed that over 20 goblins were born each day, and they only took about 20 days to fully mature. As long as the Goblin Queen lived, the goblin population would keep growing. Realizing this, Yunos decided to destroy everything in sight. The goblins surrounded him, clearly trying to protect their queen. Seeing their desperation, Yunos understood how much they valued her. However, their efforts were pointless against him. He continued his attack, wiping out most of the goblins until only a few and the queen were left. With the Goblin Queen as the final target, Yunos hesitated. He avoided getting too close to them. They smelled absolutely terrible. Yunos decided to defeat the goblins without getting too close. The goblins stood confused as they watched him pick up stones nearby. He could throw them from a distance, but he wasn't confident about his aim. Still, since his target was large, he figured it wouldn't be too hard. He threw the first stone like a skilled pitcher, but it missed and only hit the Goblin Queen's left shoulder. Yunos felt disappointed because he had been aiming for her head. Refusing to give up, he adjusted his aim and threw another stone at her belly. This time it hit perfectly. The stone pierced through the Goblin Queen, leaving the other goblins shocked and unable to help her. In the end, the Goblin Queen fell, defeated. Yunos felt proud of himself for stopping her and saving future victims like the beautiful elves in his imagination. However, he realized he smelled awful from being around so many goblins and wondered if there was a river nearby to wash up. After finding a river and cleaning himself, Yunos felt refreshed, both in body and mind. He decided to explore the area, expecting to find something interesting in a town of this size. While wandering, his face lit up with excitement. He had discovered a shopping mall. He couldn't help but jump with joy. Yunos went straight to the sports section where he found a big backpack. In the kitchen section, he grabbed an iron grill. From the home appliances section, he took a cooler box. Finally, he visited the grocery section and picked up some expired salt, canned food, and drinks. Yunos managed to gather everything he needed to feel like he had stepped back into a functioning world. However, he almost forgot to check on news about the Empire. Just kidding, he didn't forget. Along the way, he picked up some magazines and newspapers. It had been 200 years and he realized that a lot had changed for the worse. First, he discovered that the Empire was in serious trouble. The Western Front had fallen to the elves of Einhell. Even more unsettling, Yunos couldn't find any news after May 25, 1667. The last articles he read talked about the Empire using their ultimate trump card. As a devoted supporter of the Empire, Yunos couldn't shake the bad feeling these articles gave him. Was his homeland really destroyed? The thought scared him, but he knew he had to find out the truth. To do that, he would need to visit the imperial capital. Yunos tried to calm himself as he lay down and thought about his next steps. He decided to first head to Luke Dill, a town near the border of Canaan, to see how the kingdom was holding up. All he needed now was to prepare himself mentally for what might come. A man received a request to check the Goblin's Den in Luke Dill. A noble-looking man confirmed the request and asked the man's team to take care of it. He turned to Orlando and asked if he could handle it. Orlando replied, telling the noble Arngale not to beg like that. He said he couldn't agree to it just because Arngale bowed to him. Orlando mentioned that he had recently added new members to his team, and this task would be good practice for them. However, he asked for a larger reward. Arngale agreed to the request. Orlando then excitedly said that his team, Akatsuki no So, would take care of everything. The next day, some goblins were wandering around the forest. They didn't know that Yunos was nearby, blending in like a tree. He waved at us and explained that he had used his imitation ability. It allowed his big body to blend in with the surroundings so he wouldn't be noticed. But it wasn't the time for jokes, so he slapped the nearest tree. Yunos realized he needed to control his strong body when he was upset. With the few words he knew, he described the Empire's science as scary. However, he needed to be careful. His body didn't need sleep, but the night before he had slept deeply. He didn't even realize it, and it was probably because he was so exhausted. It was like hunger and eating. If he ran out of energy while fighting, he could end up in a dangerous situation. For now, he had to stay cautious. Yunos soon reached Luke Dill, where the tall castle walls proved it was the border town he had been looking for. But he noticed some goblins running out of the gates. He wondered if they were fighting the Canaan people. Since he could use his imitation ability, Yunos decided to see what was going on inside. He walked through the goblins like they were pins in a bowling alley. Yunos quietly blended into the surroundings like a shadow. He soon spotted a group of humans wearing red cloths on their right arms. He realized they were part of a well-known corps from the Canaan army. Yunos counted about 50 of them, fighting off 300 goblins. The humans were surrounded and Yunos thought it might be bad for them. But when he saw Orlando leading the group, he felt confident they could handle it. Even though Yunos didn't understand Orlando's words, he could tell that Orlando was good at giving orders. He was also skilled with a sword. It didn't look fancy to Yunos, but it was enough to fight off goblins. As Yunos expected, the 300 goblins were quickly wiped out. He didn't bother scavenging because he hated the horrible smell of the goblins. He regretted not taking anything with him. Then, the mage from the army used a detection spell to check for any survivors. A burst of magic filled the area and even hit Yunos. He felt an itch and saw the mage point in his direction. Yunos couldn't believe such magic existed and he tried to sneak away. But Orlando ordered his men to chase the monster they had detected. Yunos quickly leaped between buildings, but the army was right behind him. He got too excited about using his imitation magic and didn't notice how close they were. He didn't want to get into trouble with the humans. The mage quickly chanted something and a tall wall of fire appeared in front of Yunos. He stopped running and Orlando called him out. Orlando pointed his sword at Yunos, wearing a smug smile. Yunos got angry almost instantly, thinking Orlando was trying to provoke him. Even though he didn't want to fight, he could feel his blood boiling. There was no guarantee the others could handle him, but it was Orlando who challenged him first. Yunos then took a fighting stance and faced the humans. Orlando was surprised. He had thought Yunos was just another monster, but he had never seen anything like this before. His female companion Annie said the monster in front of them felt dangerous. Orlando agreed. He was starting to feel scared. He remembered that Arngale hadn't paid him enough for this. He quickly ordered the rookies to step back, realizing the monster in front of them was on a completely different level. Seeing the weaker humans step back, Yunos was impressed that Orlando had made the right decision. Because of that, Yunos felt happy that he could do his best against them. Orlando then gave the order to attack. The mage and the archers fired their shots, but Yunos, who was walking toward them, didn't seem affected by the attacks. Orlando was shocked to see the monster in front of them taking no damage at all, stopping their momentum. The vanguards then moved forward and tried to stab Yunos with their swords and spears, but the blades broke into pieces and didn't hurt him. Seeing that the vanguards couldn't do anything against Yunos, Orlando decided to step forward. He saw how the monster looked unstoppable and felt his blood boil with excitement. Yunos was happy to see Orlando step forward since he was the one who started the fight. He was impressed by Orlando's quick slashes even though he was using a heavy weapon. But it wasn't fast enough for Yunos, and he easily deflected Orlando's sword with his bare hands. Orlando and his men were shocked to see the sword stop like that. Orlando could feel his team's morale dropping and realized that the monster in front of them was truly terrifying. When Annie saw her leader in trouble, she rushed to help him without hesitation. Yunos got excited when he saw a blonde beauty running toward him. But he couldn't let her get past him, so he tried to stop her with his fist. Annie quickly dodged his punch and ducked, surprising him. What surprised him even more was the crossbow she pulled out from nowhere. She fired the crossbow and Yunos watched the arrow coming toward him in slow motion. Orlando and the rest of his team were speechless. Annie limped to the ground, calling Yunos a real monster. Yunos stood tall, biting the arrow and glaring at them. Orlando saw that Yunos was about to attack and tried to help Annie, but it was too late. Yunos grabbed Annie like she was a toy. Annie tried to break free, but it was useless. Yunos could feel how toned her body was. Based on how the melons resting on his thumb, he guessed she was size 4. Not wanting to hurt her, Yunos decided to throw her a little farther. But to his surprise, Annie slipped from his grasp, leaving her clothes behind as she used some kind of strange liquid to escape and flashed her melons. As he looked at Annie's bare melons with wide eyes, Yunos realized she was actually size 5. Seeing Yunos suddenly froze, Orlando ordered a counterattack. They couldn't let Annie's risky move go to waste. They quickly surrounded Yunos. Yunos decided to forgive them for the sake of Annie's melons. Everyone attacked, but Yunos easily disarmed or knocked them out. It looked like he was taking things easy now. Orlando joined the fight too, but as expected, Yunos easily blocked Orlando's sword with his bare hands. While Orlando was left confused, Annie also joined the attack. This time she pulled out a magic sword and struck Yunos across the chest. It seemed to hurt him at first, but the wound quickly healed and closed. Annie felt crushed again. Seeing that even the magic sword didn't work, Orlando realized they were doomed. He understood that they couldn't defeat Yunos. Right then, the only thing he could think about was getting as many people to escape as possible. But even though he tried to act as a distraction, he wondered how long he could hold off such powerful monsters. Then, surprisingly, Yunos pointed his finger, like a lawyer in a courtroom. Everyone froze for a moment, but soon they realized Yunos was pointing at Orlando. This made Orlando understand that he could save everyone by sacrificing himself. He hadn't hoped for this chance, but he quickly told everyone to retreat. He told them the monster wanted to fight him alone. A minute ago, Yunos realized he had made a mistake, turning the fight into a one-sided hunt. He had to fix things and had no choice but to challenge Orlando to a one-on-one fight. Annie called Orlando an idiot for thinking he could win alone. Orlando said things would be fine, and when they got home, he promised to treat her to the best drink. He then jokingly told her to hide her melons, or his inner werewolf might attack her. Crying, Annie called him an idiot. Orlando apologized, saying he didn't have a choice. He knew better than anyone that he couldn't beat Yunos. The difference in their abilities was clear, but as long as no one else died, Orlando didn't care. He wasn't sure why Yunos chose to fight him, but he figured he was the only one who fit what Yunos wanted. On top of that, he could see Yunos waiting. Smart monsters used to be a problem, but this time it was helpful. Orlando planned to send back as many of his team alive as possible because that was what a captain should do. He was ready to offer his own life. Orlando apologized to Yunos for making him wait. He then raised his sword, and Yunos took a fighting stance. The tension between them was so thick that everyone around them could feel it. Annie was worried about Orlando. Yunos moved first, and Orlando found the right moment to swing his sword down hard. But Yunos was quicker than before. Orlando couldn't do anything as Yunos grabbed his arms. The others were worried as they saw Orlando lifted up like a helpless child. Refusing to give up, Orlando pulled his right arm free from Yunos' grip and tried to reach for his second sword. But when he looked at his arm, he realized it was too injured to grab the sword anymore. That's when he understood there was nothing more he could do. Annie and the others screamed Orlando's name as Yunos opened his jaws, putting Orlando's head in his mouth, and was about to bite off his head. But suddenly, Yunos spat Orlando out and tossed him to the side. Everyone, including Orlando, was confused. As they watched Yunos run away, Orlando wondered if he had done something to make him leave or if Yunos had poisoned him. While the others stepped back, Annie asked Orlando when he last washed his hair. Orlando thought for a moment and remembered it had been 3 years. Meanwhile, Yunos had spent some time puking in the nearby forest. He couldn't believe how gross Orlando was and wondered when he last washed his hair. He had planned to pretend to be in pain and run away, but he hadn't expected to be tortured by the awful smell. He promised himself he would get back at Orlando next time. Despite that, Yunos was thankful to be alive, and even considered the melons as a nice surprise. He decided to explore further, but then he smelled something strange, the scent of human blood. It was a bit far away, but with his sharp sense of smell, he knew he could find it. He decided to check it out. Yunos discovered the source of the blood smell and offered his respects to the dead. The wounds on the bodies didn't seem to be caused by monsters, and their weapons and belongings were missing. Noticing a trail of carriage tracks leading into the forest, Yunos guessed that bandits were behind the attack. The idea of facing people who had killed and stolen made him oddly pleased, as he felt justified in doing the same to them. Following the tracks, Yunos eventually caught up to the bandits. His excitement was plain on his face, which terrified the group. The bandit leader stepped out of the carriage to see what was going on, but screamed in fear at the sight of Yunos' terrifying appearance. The other bandits panicked and fled, leaving their leader behind, who quickly followed their lead. Yunos felt disappointed when no one dared to fight him, and he realized the carriage likely held nothing valuable. But when he checked inside, he was surprised to find 5 women completely uncovered, and crates filled with supplies. He paused for a moment, taking in what he saw and committing the image to memory. A small smile crossed his face at the unexpected discovery. Yunos guessed that the women were probably being transported to be sold as slaves. Although he was amused by the sight, he recalled he needed essential supplies more than anything else. He decided it would be smarter to go after the bandits who had run away and uncover their hideout. After covering the carriage, he prepared to leave. The eldest of the women, her voice faint, asked if Yunos had saved them. Before leaving, he took another glance at the women. burning properly the memory into his mind. His mischievous smile left the women puzzled, though he had no intention of explaining. Yunos turned toward the road and began sniffing around for the bandits. Thanks to his enhanced sense of smell, he found their trail easily. As he experienced his improved physical abilities and sharper senses, he silently appreciated the Empire's technology. However, he felt disappointed because two important things had been taken from him: his ability to communicate well and his mushroom. On top of that, he didn't even need weapons. Yet he was still carrying Lazelle's magic sword. After hiding his backpack in some nearby bushes, Yunos followed the scent into a cave where the bandits were hiding. He used his imitation ability and stepped inside. The cave looked like a hideout, but Yunos found it strange that there wasn't a guard stationed outside. He wondered if the bandits might be fighting among themselves. The hallways inside were surprisingly clean at first, but then, Yunos came across a prison filled with skeletons and rotting bodies, including what looked like a mother and child. The sight made Yunos feel sick, and he realized these bandits didn't deserve any mercy. Suddenly, Yunos heard screams of pain and death nearby. He could hear the bandits apologizing to their boss, only to be killed moments later. Yunos guessed they were being punished for abandoning the carriage earlier, but he didn't feel sorry for them at all as he listened to their cries. Then, a harsh and unsettling voice echoed through the area. The boss was scolding the bandits loudly. Yunos noticed that the boss was speaking Canaan but wasn't fluent in it, making him wonder if the boss was a foreigner. The boss seemed furious, yelling at his men for running away just because a scary monster had shown up. Yunos figured the bandits might be part of a large criminal group spread across the country. That meant there could be a lot of loot for him to claim later. Eventually, the screaming stopped, and Yunos assumed the boss was done killing his own men. With the bandits' numbers reduced, Yunos decided it was time to step in. However, the doorway was too small for him to enter, and he worried about getting stuck. With no other choice, he charged at the door like a quarterback, smashing through it along with part of the wall. Even so, he still remembered to apologize for the intrusion. But what he saw inside wasn't human. A terrifying monster glared at him. The creature had a humanoid upper body but a spider-like lower body. To Yunos' surprise, the monster could speak Ferletos' language fluently. The spider-like creature demanded to know who Yunos was, accusing him of being the monster that had stolen his women. Yunos stood there, confused and trying to process the situation. Then it hit him. The creature in front of him was just like him. Both of them were experimental soldiers created by the Empire. Meanwhile, Arngale was surprised when he saw Orlando looking clean and tidy for once. Orlando noticed his reaction and asked what was wrong. Instead of answering, Arngale asked when the last time was that Orlando had cleaned himself. Orlando understood why he asked and admitted that a lot had happened recently. He explained that he had no choice but to clean up after Annie and the others insulted him, saying he smelled as bad as a goblin. Orlando then reported that the goblin subjugation was a success, but he had bad news to share. He revealed that they had discovered a new type of monster. Even with everyone working together, they couldn't harm it at all. He added that 7 of their men had been taken down and they were completely defeated. Orlando described the monster as humanoid in shape but as large as an ogre. Its body was entirely gray and it had a tail. Their weapons and magic were useless against it. The creature wasn't just strong and tough but also quick and intelligent. Essentially, the worst kind of monster. Orlando laughed nervously, breaking into a cold sweat as he explained the situation. Arngale asked if Orlando's Titan Slayer weapon had been helpful. Orlando admitted that even he couldn't land a single hit on the monster. Though the story sounded hopeless, he said that was the reality they had to face. Arngale then asked what they should do, but Orlando threw the question back at him. Orlando suggested they would need a high-quality magic sword and a high-ranking wizard to stand a chance. Arngale wondered aloud what would happen if the Night Order came across such a creature. Orlando replied that even they would be defeated. The thought of reporting this made Arngale's head hurt. Orlando reminded him that it was his responsibility to report such things. For now, Arngale asked Orlando to handle the situation with the new monster, but Orlando said it would depend on his abilities. Arngale sighed and commented that this new or mutated monster might not be the only one of its kind. Annoyed, Orlando told him not to jinx it, saying if more of those creatures appeared, they would be in serious trouble. Meanwhile, the spider-like figure kept mocking Yunos, calling him names for silently staring. Yunos was still shocked to hear someone speaking his language. Based on the Spider-Man's appearance, he assumed they might be the same kind of being. Yunos tried to explain that he was a citizen of the same empire, but the Spider-Man only heard growling noises instead of words. Realizing this, Yunos decided to communicate by writing on the ground. However, when he tried to move his hand, he noticed he couldn't. He was completely stuck. Upon closer inspection, he realized he had been trapped in transparent threads. The Spider-Man warned him not to move without permission. Yunos wondered when the threads had been placed around him. The Spider-Man then began ranting angrily about his frustrations. He was upset about the failures of his subordinates and was destroying their lifeless bodies. He also seemed bitter about losing his magnificent mushroom. His words revealed cruelty, as he described mistreating another pair of mother and son for his amusement. Yunos found himself thinking back to the mother and child he had seen among the prisoners, and started to piece together the Spider-Man's horrifying actions. As the spider-like man frantically wondered where to hide the next captured woman, Yunos launched a surprise attack. However, the Spider-Man dodged the powerful punch just in time. Yunos understood why the Spider-Man was angry. He too had lost his mushroom and the people he loved. But the person standing in front of him was far from good. Yunos made up his mind to take him down right then and there. The Spider-Man was shocked when his threads were easily torn apart by a monster. From this, Yunos guessed that the Spider-Man hadn't realized they were both experimental soldiers. Knowing the Spider-Man could prepare for an attack like before, Yunos decided to stay cautious. For now, he kept his distance and worked on removing the threads. He then used one of the fallen bandits to collect them. When he saw how much thread there was, Yunos realized the Spider-Man had prepared them ahead of time. The Spider-Man had complained about how smart the monster was, but he couldn't believe it had the nerve to fight him. Yunos then used the bandit's corpse wrapped in thread to distract the Spider-Man. He tried to grab its head and crush it to end the fight. While he managed to grab the Spider-Man, it quickly escaped his grasp. To Yunos' surprise, the Spider-Man shed its skin to break free. Even worse, the mucus left behind from the skin acted like acid. Yunos fell to his knees in pain as Spider-Man laughed and spat poison at him. The poison drenched Yunos, and the Spider-Man laughed even harder before leaving, assuming Yunos would die. At that moment, Yunos realized how deadly the poison was. His body was already going numb, and he knew it could kill him if he didn't act fast. Then he remembered the potion he had taken from Diara. He didn't know if it would work, but he figured it was worth trying. Despite his weakness, Yunos managed to walk out of the cave and grab the potion from the backpack he had left outside. He poured the potion onto his injured arm, hoping for the best. Slowly, the numbness and pain began to fade. Before long, he was fully healed, though his body was still in bad shape, with his bones visible under his skin. Yunos realized how useful potions were and felt thankful to Diara. Although he had stolen them from her, Yunos panicked, not because it was life-threatening, but because it was the first time he had felt real pain since waking up. It was a serious situation, and he couldn't imagine the spider-like creature using the same ability on humans. He realized there could be more victims, like the ones he had seen earlier. Yunos had no desire to play the hero, but he couldn't ignore innocent women being harmed. He was also a man of culture, and he wasn't going to let a monster rob him of that. He didn't need a reason to stop the monster. Yunos soon felt that his body had recovered. The pain and numbness had disappeared. His sharp sense of smell reminded him of the creature's scent, and from it, he knew who the spider's next target was. At the same time, the Spider-Man perched on a tree branch watching a carriage moving below. Driving it was the beautiful woman Yunos had saved earlier. She had caught the Spider-Man's attention. It decided she would be its next victim, but first it wondered how to make her suffer before taking what it wanted. Suddenly his plans were interrupted when something hit a nearby tree. He turned around and saw Yunos holding a handful of stones. He couldn't believe the monster was still alive. As Yunos started throwing stones at him, he had to dodge quickly. He found Yunos frustrating because his target might escape at this rate. It also annoyed him that Yunos kept a safe distance, aware of the danger posed by his threads. He couldn't believe a simple monster was getting smarter. Meanwhile, Yunos picked up more stones and realized his aim had improved, thanks to his encounters with the goblins. For now, he had to stop the Spider-Man from chasing the carriage. The women needed time to get away safely. This was no longer just a fight. It was a test of endurance between him and the Spider-Man. The Spider-Man grew annoyed and decided to attack directly. Noticing this, Yunos quickly jumped backward to create some distance. The Spider-Man became even more frustrated and shouted at Yunos not to run away. In response, Yunos started firing more stones, but the Spider-Man managed to dodge all of them. Yunos kept moving further away, making sure to stay out of reach as the Spider-Man tried to close in for a melee attack. Frustrated by Yunos' strategy, the Spider-Man finally lost his patience and suddenly vanished from sight. He reappeared above Yunos, attempting to shower him with poison again. Yunos anticipated this move and realized the Spider-Man would likely retreat the moment he dodged the poison. Timing his move carefully, Yunos dodged and grabbed a nearby tree. Using the momentum, he swung around the tree and shifted to another spot, maintaining a safe distance. The Spider-Man's movements were exactly what Yunos had expected. Yunos planned to keep closing in if the Spider-Man retreated and to pull back if the Spider-Man advanced. He also intended to use the nearby trees to tangle the Spider-Man's threads. If an opportunity came, he would uproot a tree and launch it at the Spider-Man. It was a straightforward plan, simple to execute and repeat as needed. The frustrated Spider-Man told Yunos to fight fairly, but Yunos had no intention of listening. especially not to someone he considered a criminal. This wasn't even a battle, it was a hunt. The chase went on for days, with Yunos constantly harassing Spider-Man and staying close behind him. After several days, Spider-Man felt completely drained. He couldn't tell how much time had passed. It felt like a month since he first confronted Yunos. He couldn't understand why he was stuck dealing with such a creature, or how Yunos had managed to corner him like this. Exhaustion made his head spin. He was out of energy because Yunos had stopped him from eating or sleeping. On top of that, he couldn't even produce his threads anymore. Suddenly, one of his legs was crushed by a flying rock and he took serious damage. Strangely, he could feel the pain now, and that confused him. He wondered why someone like him had to suffer so much, being treated like an experiment. Frustrated, he began shouting angrily and charged at Yunos. Before he could get far, more rocks flew toward him, crushing his other legs. It was as if Yunos were a skilled pitcher throwing from a mound. The Spider-Man collapsed helplessly on the ground, unable to stand. He tried to crawl away, crying in pain like a starving child. Yunos walked over, grabbed him by the neck, and tore his humanoid upper body away from his spider-like lower half. The Spider-Man screamed and writhed in agony. Yunos carried him like a broken toy and approached a tree. Without saying a word, he slammed the Spider-Man's face against the trunk and started scratching something into the bark. The Spider-Man, still in pain, noticed the markings. His eyes widened as he realized Yunos was writing in the language of Ferletos. It hit him like a shock. Yunos was just like him, another experimental soldier. He looked at Yunos with new understanding, but Yunos growled in response as if to say, "Die!" The Spider-Man panicked and began begging for mercy, saying they were the same and should be comrades. But before he could say more, Yunos crushed his head, silencing him forever. Yunos stood there, thinking to himself that he could never be grouped together with someone like that. Many days later, our friendly monster protagonist stood on a cliff, looking out like Mufasa. It might surprise you, but Yunos was already in the elven country of the Einhell Republic. He apologized to the viewers for making them wait so long for the elf arc. You might be wondering what happened to Yunos' mission in Canaan. Well, he took care of that too. After defeating the spider monster, he traveled to the frontline city between Canaan and Einhell. But when he arrived, he saw that Canaan had stopped using advanced technology. Instead of modern weapons, they were only using simple ballistas. In Einhell, the people worshipped nature and focused on minimal development. Because of this, the number of monsters kept growing. While this wasn't a big problem for the elves, who were strong, it was a huge issue for humans. The frontline cities should have had advanced weapons to fight off the monsters. But instead, they were still using ballistas, the same weapons from 200 years ago. Yunos was very disappointed in Canaan because he had expected much more from them. He decided to go to his usual recon spot. It had been 2 weeks since he arrived in the Elven country, and he had learned a lot about them. The women here were all incredibly beautiful, but there were also men. Yunos had heard that elves were experts in magic, and unlike humans, they could use magic without needing to say words or incantations. On top of that, they could use magic endlessly and with great power, which Yunos thought was like cheating. The elves used magic for everyday tasks like lighting fires, picking up things, and even doing laundry. This constant use of magic helped them become so skilled at it. However, the real danger of elves wasn't their magic. Yunos soon reached his recon spot and wondered if it was time yet. Then the greatest threat appeared. The truth was, elves were incredibly cute and beautiful. He had known about their beautiful looks, but seeing them in person made him feel like they were on another level. This was coming from someone who had seen over 100 elven women in person. Yunos was patrolling the area for research purposes on this dangerous species. After observing enough, Yunos decided to move on to his next recon spot. In the next spot, Yunos activated his enhanced eyesight. He saw Miss Elf number 6, who had come to take a bath with some elven children. Miss Elf number 6 was someone Yunos found very interesting, and she seemed to be the real threat. She was a teacher who always brought the children with her wherever she went. Of course, number 6 was a nickname Yunos had given her. It was exciting to see everything bare up close, but the sight of her clothes clinging to her skin was also something else. With his zoom function, Yunos could see everything clearly, which made it even more intense. Then, the children started getting rowdy, and Yunos knew it was the right time. The kids began playing with Miss Elf number 6's clothes. She was the gentle type, so she would always fall for their tricks, which was why the boys acted this way. Yunos found it outrageous, but secretly hoped the boys would do more. In the end, the boys were scolded. As Miss Elf number 6 left with the kids, Yunos praised her as he usually did and congratulated the boys for their hard work. But then, Yunos suddenly felt a heavy presence. There were 2 huge forces nearby. Yunos was shocked to see number 8 appear earlier than expected. He hadn't had a chance to rest and began sweating nervously. Number 8 was another elf Yunos had become interested in, as her presence was overwhelming. It was so big, in fact, that she always had 2 attendants with her, which showed she held a high position in the country. If she were the queen, it would be serious trouble. However, it seemed there was a reason she kept her eyes closed. She also had a more ritualistic way of bathing compared to the other elves. It was clear she wasn't ordinary, and the mystery around her made her stand out. Because of this, Yunos couldn't afford to miss a single moment and had to watch her carefully. She was truly one of the most terrifying beings. Despite the excitement in his mind, Yunos felt nothing in the basement. He remembered that he couldn't do anything, even though a delicious feast was right in front of him. Then he thought back to how Spider-Man had cried out in frustration over his missing mushroom. Spider-Man's words reminded Yunos that his own mushroom was gone too. He also remembered how skilled Spider-Man was with his abilities. Yunos wondered if the emptiness Spider-Man felt had built up and driven him crazy. Yunos couldn't help but feel sorry for someone like him. He even thought that he might end up the same way someday. After saying goodbye to number 8, Yunos suddenly felt calm. He was grateful for the emotion suppression function, which helped him avoid sinking deeper into these depressing thoughts. Since it was getting late in the afternoon, Yunos decided to use the time to gather supplies and do chores, knowing that the elves didn't visit the river after sunset. Yunos drained the blood from a deer he had hunted, cut some of the meat, and cooked it. As expected, the taste was bland without salt. After eating a full meal, he lay down for the night. He rolled to his side and tried to sleep but felt restless. He sat up thinking about how the Spider-Man existed. He realized he might find more test subjects like himself in the Empire's capital. But Yunos had other reasons to go there too. He always knew he was meant to return to the Imperial capital, but he couldn't make up his mind. He knew the Empire had turned into a huge forest, filled with ruins and monsters, and that time had stopped on May 2nd. He understood what had happened to the Empire, but he didn't want to admit it. He still hoped the Empire might still exist somewhere else, even if that hope was tiny. He also wondered if he would end up broken like the Spider-Man. Right now, he found some distraction watching the elves from the shadows. But deep down, he knew he was just avoiding reality. It was harder than he thought. After some time, Yunos decided to go to the Imperial capital. The next morning, he packed his things into his backpack. He then went to his usual cliff to say goodbye to the elves. At that moment, number 6 was taking a bath. Yunos froze for a moment, then realized that leaving was a really tough choice. For God's sake, please hurry up and go. De'Ara remembered a flashback from her childhood. An old man had told her she needed to take off her clothes if she wanted to become a great wizard. Even though she didn't want to, De'Ara felt she had no choice but to go through with it. She wanted to go home and see her parents. But when she finally returned to her village, everything was burned down and everyone was gone. De'Ara suddenly woke up gasping for air and covered in sweat. It had all been a nightmare, and it felt like the worst one she'd ever had. Later, as she walked through the streets of Rekal in the Kingdom of Canaan, De'Ara remembered something a woman had said to her. The woman was the leader of a group of 5 women whom Yunos had saved before. She had told De'Ara she had already shared information with the guards, but any extra details would cost a fee. De'Ara hesitated, but eventually gave her a silver coin. The woman called her generous and asked what she wanted to know. De'Ara asked for all the information the woman had, even the smallest details. The woman explained that she couldn't offer much for just a silver coin, but if De'Ara was okay with that, she had some information to share. The woman explained that she and others had been kidnapped and were on their way to the bandits' hideout. While that was bad enough, things got worse when a strange gray monster appeared and caused chaos. She described how the bandits ran away in fear when they saw the creature. The woman understood why after seeing the monster herself. De'Ara asked why the monster attacked the carriage, but the woman didn't know. She said the monster just seemed to search around the carriage, like it was looking for something, but it didn't hurt anyone. After staring at them for a while, the monster ran off. However, it came back shortly after to look at them again before leaving without causing harm. The woman believed the monster was focused on their physical appearance, especially on their breasts, thinking it was a common view that such creatures are attracted to women. In the end, they were released, but they remained cautious on their way home. Then the woman commented on how beautiful De'Ara was and praised her figure. She even offered De'Ara a job at a brothel with high pay. De'Ara wasn't sure if that was meant to be a compliment, but hoped she could ask the woman for help in the future. As De'Ara walked out of the brothel, she realized that the monster was getting close to Canaan's borders. She passed by some young adventurers talking about how to spend their hard-earned money. De'Ara stopped for a moment, feeling like she could relate to them a little. She also remembered how she became an apprentice at just 8 years old. Her mentor preferred young girls, and though she had magic talent, that seemed to be the only reason he took her. He wanted her for himself. Even though others showed mercy, her innocence was taken away. Still, she kept training hard until she became a full-grown adult. But when she returned to her hometown, she found it destroyed by monsters. The sight of it shattered her. She became an adventurer, hunting down monsters relentlessly, with near-death experiences happening almost every day. There were times when she was betrayed and hurt by fellow adventurers, but none of it mattered anymore. The only thing that kept her going was her determination to wipe out every monster in the world. During those tough times, Diera met the siblings, Reina and Lizelle. They invited her to join their party, and it was the first time Diera had ever done that. Later, Gista, who often teamed up with the siblings, officially joined the party. Diera felt like she could leave any time, but after going through hardships, joys, and many dangerous situations together, she started to feel different. During one mission, even though Lizelle looked nearly dead, he defeated an ogre and got a magic sword as a reward. Gista was amazed they had survived, while Lena, who was healing him, told Gista to be quiet. Lizelle asked what to do with the sword. Diera suggested that Lizelle, as their leader, should take it and become a man worthy of it. This temporary team had truly become a real home for Diera. But as always, monsters took away the people she cared about. The sword, Yunos, was proof that her team and herself had a place to belong. Diera swore to get it back no matter what, and promised to return to Lena's side. She hoped Lena would patiently wait for her. Yunos walked through some ruins, and it was clear that this place had been affected by the war. He had left Einhell and was heading southeast toward the imperial capital as quickly as he could. By the time the sun had set, he had reached the ruins. Based on its location, he guessed it was the town of Idres, but it was hard to tell because it looked so run down. Yunos thought it might be the work of the elves using their magic. He had been watching them secretly for half a month, so he felt like they owed him something in return. Even though he gave a thumbs up like an imperial politician, he didn't hear any reactions, so he just kept going. Night fell, but Yunos didn't feel tired and kept running. As he ran without a clear direction, he saw a tall structure ahead and recognized it. As he got closer, he realized it was the Shubaru Iron Tower. It was leaning but still standing after hundreds of years. The Empire's technology was truly impressive. Yunos remembered visiting the tower with his family in the past. He stopped for a moment, lost in the memories of those family times he still cherished. A group of goblins appeared suddenly, noticing Yunos because he was trespassing. Yunos had already smelled them coming, their stinky scent filling the air. However, there were more goblins than he had expected, and he wondered if a goblin queen was with them. He smirked, thinking it was the perfect time to release some frustration. He glared at the goblins, and that made the poor creatures shake with fear. As the sun rose, the ground was covered with pieces of goblins and their blood. Nothing moved among them. They had all turned into piles of slaughtered bodies. In the center of a coliseum, the goblin queen lay dead, surrounded by the lifeless bodies of her children. Meanwhile, Yunos was already heading somewhere else. It had taken him longer than expected to deal with all the goblins, but he was getting closer to the town of Aiga. He used his enhanced vision and saw that the town was in worse shape than he had thought. From a distance, a strange feeling about the town grew inside him. Every town he had visited so far was covered in green, but Aiga was covered in gray ash. This made Yunos suspect something unusual had happened. His gut feeling had been right so far. The people there looked completely burned. He wondered if the elves had done this, but even if they were at war, they wouldn't burn everything so thoroughly. Yunos had suspected this from the very beginning. He remembered reading an article on May 2nd, the last day of the Empire, that talked about the ultimate weapon. Even though he didn't want to believe it, Yunos knew it was possible for the Empire to have done something like that, especially after seeing how Aiga had turned into a barren wasteland. He guessed the ultimate weapon had been used after all. He realized he needed a break since he hadn't rested since leaving Einhell and taking care of the goblins. But he also knew he had to get to the capital quickly to confirm something. Suddenly, Yunos stopped running and stared at what was in front of him. He had already known about it, but didn't want to accept it because of his ties to the Empire. The answer had been right in front of him the whole time. In front of him was a massive crater, clearly the result of a huge explosion. Yunos jumped into the crater and felt the sand for the first time. He had never been to the beach before, but he wondered if the sand here felt the same. Yunos looked around the center of the crater, trying to understand how much explosives it would have taken to make something this big. He now understood why Kanan had given up on science. The crater beneath him was a sign of what technology could do. As a citizen of the Empire who had survived all of this, Yunos couldn't help but want to know what had happened to his homeland. He questioned if the Empire's path had been a mistake. Frustration built up inside him, and he let out a loud, terrifying roar. In just 2 days, Yunos was back in Einhell, watching the elves closely. He observed them like a critic, but still greeted you, our dear viewers. As he expected, his homeland, the Empire, had been completely destroyed. Worse, it had happened by their own hands. At that point, the only thing Yunos could do was investigate the greatest threat on the continent, the elves and their true nature. As always, being a man of culture, Yunos spent his time studying the elves' daily lives. Deep down, though, Yunos knew he was avoiding reality. He wondered if someone from the Empire might still be alive, working on technology that could help him become human again. But his hope shattered when he saw the destruction caused by the ultimate weapon. While Yunos didn't hate his current form, he still wished he could return to being human. He worried about living as a monster, unable to communicate with others. Despite the heavy stress, watching the elves bathe, especially number 8, helped him relax and gave him some energy. Thanks to the elves, Yunos managed to keep his sanity. He started thinking that if he couldn't become human again, it might be better to accept his life as a monster. After all, he had seen what happened to those who couldn't accept their fate. Gradually, Yunos realized he didn't mind staying in his current lifestyle after all. Even though he had become a monster, Yunos hadn't completely lost hope. He still found small ways to enjoy being human, even in his current state. What mattered most to him now was focusing on living life as best as he could. However, there was one thing that constantly disappointed him: food. Every time he ate meat, he craved salt because everything tasted bland. The salt he found in the Empire was terrible, and his only option was to steal it from others. Reluctantly, he decided to break his own rule against stealing. With that, he quickly made up his mind to get salt from Canaan. Once that was settled, Yunos, now a monster, began his journey to Canaan. Meanwhile, in Canaan, Orlando looked troubled. One of his subordinates glared at him and scolded him for not even knowing basic reading and writing. Orlando argued that being able to write his name was good enough. His subordinate pointed out how everyone else was studying and working hard, while their captain was doing nothing to improve. Since there wasn't much time, the subordinate offered to read the report for Orlando. Orlando thanked him, trying to act playful, but his subordinate, Edward, felt annoyed and wanted to hit him for it. Orlando learned about a goblin colony that had been recently wiped out. Edward couldn't believe the reports at first, but after encountering a new type of monster, they both knew it had to be the creature's doing. At that time, the monster, Yunos, was classified as a disaster-class threat because no major destruction had been caused yet. However, Orlando believed Yunos deserved a higher threat level. Just by looking at the creature, it was clear he could cause more harm than anyone imagined. Orlando predicted that the bounty for Yunos would increase if the situation escalated, and he vowed their team would be the one to claim it. Edward was surprised by how excited Orlando seemed, and teased that money might as well be written across his face. He also reminded Orlando to keep his aggressive tendencies under control. Orlando reluctantly agreed but pointed out that they still needed the money. Edward then mentioned how their funds had been drained after buying a large supply of weapons to fight the monster. Hearing this, Orlando suggested recruiting new team members to train. As for the weapons, he was satisfied with their quality but noted they needed more mages since their team was short on magical support. Edward explained that finding skilled mages was difficult. Even the kingdom of Caesarea struggled to find good ones. Orlando agreed but joked that he hoped a talented and desperate mage would show up at their door. He also made a playful remark about wanting the mage to be big-boobed. Edward smirked and threatened to report those words to Annie, which made Orlando panic. He quickly asked why Annie's name was even brought up. Edward teased him further, mentioning a 200-year-old bottle of wine at the tavern that might help him forget. Feeling trapped, Orlando reluctantly offered to treat Edward to the expensive wine. At that moment, Annie walked in and overheard the conversation. She excitedly asked if Orlando was treating everyone. Soon the rest of the team joined in, placing their orders after hearing Annie's words. Orlando panicked, trying to stop them, warning them that they needed to stick to their budget. Edward couldn't help but laugh, thinking that Orlando had gotten exactly what he deserved for slacking off. Yunos stood casually, watching a group of trembling men. In front of them were the bodies of adventurers lying in pools of blood. Although he couldn't understand their words, it was clear the men, likely bandits, were terrified of him. He had just arrived in Canaan and was surprised to stumble upon a merchant caravan being attacked by bandits. Judging by the scene, the noisy ones were probably the bandits, while the dead were the coachmen and the guards. His eyes rested on a fallen female adventurer. He felt sorry for what had happened to her. On closer inspection, he noticed she had a petite figure and some materials nearby that seemed to be padding. He realized she must have faced many challenges and silently prayed for her soul. Suddenly, he noticed he was being attacked. However, the bandits' weapons couldn't pierce his tough skin. He was surprised by how unskilled they were, attacking him directly instead of trying to ambush him. He wondered if their leader was as foolish as a goblin. Now certain they were bandits, Yunos decided not to hold back. He swung his arm with incredible speed, crushing one bandit's head with a single blow. The horrifying sight caused the remaining bandits to panic and run, but it was too late. Yunos couldn't stop himself from unleashing his full strength. He impaled one bandit with his arm, then chased the others. With a powerful kick, he struck another bandit, his attack tearing through the man's body. The last survivor collapsed to the ground in terror, crying and wetting himself as Yunos approached menacingly. Yunos recalled advice from his teacher about taking the initiative to strike fear into others. Agreeing with the thought, he finished off the last bandit with a swift kick, crushing his head. Oddly, the teacher he remembered wasn't real but an actress from a rented DVD. As the situation settled, Yunos looked around and realized he had gone too far again. Even though the people he fought were bandits, they were still human, but Yunos didn't seem to care much. After all, bandits were people who harmed others, and from Kanan's point of view, they should have been thankful to Yunos for saving them the trouble of putting the bandits on trial. For now, Yunos expected to be rewarded for dealing with the bandits. He focused on the merchant's caravan, hoping to find treasure inside, especially salt. When he checked the contents, he found something unexpected. More people. They screamed in fear when they saw him. Later, by a nearby river, Yunos was smiling brightly. He had finally found what he was looking for: salt. There were 2 jars of it. All this time he had been eating only dried meat, but now with salt he could improve his meals. Despite the number of wagons, the loot was disappointing. Aside from the salt, he found some wool, which he used to cushion the fragile jars, and a fancy water jug. The jug looked valuable because of its detailed design, so Yunos hoped it was magical. However, no matter what he tried, nothing happened. He thought about using it as a regular water jug, but it had a hole at the bottom. Yunos guessed it might have been part of a fountain. Unfortunately, it was completely useless to him, so he decided to toss it away. For now, he lay down and started thinking about his next plans. He decided he would go back to the shopping mall to get better jars for the salt because, even with the wool padding, they might still break. Recently, he had been traveling back and forth between the Empire, Canaan, and Einhell. Since he kept following the same path, he thought it would be smarter to set up a base of operations in the Empire. After a moment of reflection, he realized it was a brilliant idea. If he stocked up on essentials, he could use it as a central base, and it would definitely be worth the effort. More than anything, though, his inner child loved the idea of building something like a secret base. He was someone who enjoyed a bit of adventure, after all. For now, he decided to create the base somewhere near Einhell and Canaan. The town of Idris, or a nearby area, seemed like a perfect choice. Yunos felt a surge of excitement and couldn't wait for morning to arrive. The next morning, Yunos began his journey back to his homeland, carefully carrying the jars of salt. As he got closer to Idris, he noticed something unusual in the surroundings, colors that didn't belong there. Curious, he wondered if it could be some kind of artifact. The trees blocked his view, making it hard to use his enhanced eyesight properly. So he decided to crawl closer to investigate. He crept forward and used his enhanced sight again. Suddenly, he froze in place. A chill ran down his spine as he realized what he was looking at. Sweat formed on his brow as he understood there was no way to avoid what lay ahead. Yunos stood in front of a huge building. Just as he had thought earlier, they looked exactly like the place where he had first woken up. He tried not to focus on it too much. But this was the place where his nightmare had started. Now that he had found it again, he knew he couldn't just walk away. He made up his mind to explore the building and find out more. At the same time, far away in Karnash Fortress, which used to be controlled by the Empire, Diera let out a deep sigh. She couldn't believe they were actually attacking a stronghold full of goblins. The fortress had originally belonged to Canaan, but the Empire had taken control of it for many years. It wasn't just an ordinary fortress either. As she looked around, painful memories came back to her. She remembered how all of her teammates, except for Lena, had been wiped out. That moment stayed with her, and she couldn't stop thinking about it. It was the main reason she had not wanted to take this mission. She only agreed because the payment was high. In her mind, she blamed everything on Yunos. After he moved to Canaan, she had ended up with no money at all after crossing the border. A man called out to Diera and asked how much she charged for a night. She let out a frustrated sigh, feeling annoyed and thinking that all men acted the same. Instead of answering him directly, she walked away and pointed out that the Goblin Queen was right in front of them. If he had needs, he could take care of them there. The man stood there, confused and speechless. Nearby, another man was shocked that someone had the nerve to call out a mage from Kinoshita. He was even more surprised when he found out Diera was actually from Caesarea. In Caesarea, the Kinoshita and Itsu clans were known for their power. Being allowed to carry those names meant a person was truly strong. The first man felt lucky he didn't get burned alive for his rude comment. Still, the second man said he understood. He thought Diera's beautiful face and body were difficult to ignore. That odd moment made the two strangers bond, as if they suddenly became close like brothers. Later on, during the battle that took place the next morning, the man who had insulted Diera ended up dying in the fight. When the attack began, the mages started throwing fireballs toward the fortress. Unlike the others, Diera created one huge fireball and destroyed an entire group of goblins all at once. Her power impressed the others, especially since she had already taken down 100 enemies by herself. They weren't surprised though, since someone from Kinoshita was expected to be much stronger than normal mages. Diera, however, didn't like being called by that name. It reminded her of her old master, someone she disliked deeply. After using so much magic, she said she was out of energy and needed to fall back. Orlando, who had been nearby, thanked her for everything she had done and gave her a kind smile. Soon after, while Diera was resting, she heard some knights yelling at the mercenaries. Orland said it couldn't be helped that he ran out of magic. The knight commander kept complaining that mercenaries couldn't be trusted. Diera remembered that a knight from the local army was sent to watch over them, and that was one of the reasons she didn't want to accept the job in the first place. The mission would have been much easier if they had just set the fortress on fire, but the nobles wanted to use it again, so they told everyone to keep the damage small. This was exactly why Diera didn't like nobles. They never risked their own lives, but they were quick to complain. Then she noticed the knights pulling back. She figured the goblins were almost defeated. She just hoped those monsters didn't have any weapons left behind by the old empire. Everything ended quickly once the outer walls were taken. By the time the gate opened and the backup troops entered, only the Goblin Queen and a few of her followers were left. Orland cut the queen into pieces. Diera saw the creature's legs break, turning her into an easy target for arrows. She was finished soon after. What was supposed to be a tough battle only led to 5 deaths and 65 wounded. The fortress wasn't badly damaged, and the mission was finished. It was a clear win. The knight commander laughed, thinking the lord would be happy and that it was all because of his great leadership. But Diera felt annoyed. That same knight commander had only slowed everyone down. Just then, Orlando called out to Diera and praised her strong performance. Diera thought he was one of those men and turned her back to him. But Orlando quickly said he wasn't talking about anything like that. He meant her work. Diera asked what he meant. He then introduced himself as the leader of Daybreak Battlefield. Lloyd also gave his name. Orlando explained that he wanted to hire Diera. He believed she had already heard the rumors about a new kind of monster. He admitted that he had a personal history with that creature. He suspected that his team would be asked to take on a mission to wipe it out soon, but they didn't have enough skilled mages. Their team was small, and their magic users weren't strong enough. He said someone like Diera could really help. Diera suddenly looked serious and asked for more information. When Yunos returned, he was surprised to see the gate wide open. As he went inside, he found parts of the facility with holes that looked like they had been melted by something hot. He also saw that the elevator was melted and didn't go down very far. While looking around, he noticed some thin threads nearby. That's when he realized this was where the spider-like man had come from. Yunos kept walking down into the basement. In front of him was another gate, and it was open too. He was shocked when he heard a soft noise. It sounded like something was still working. To his surprise, the generators were still running. He couldn't believe the gate hadn't been opened before. It seemed like it only opened when someone was leaving. He quickly rushed to check what was happening. His guess had been right. The facility used hydro generators powered by groundwater underground. Because of that, one of the machines still had electricity, so the information he got from it could be trusted. Yunos was impressed. It truly felt like something the Empire would have built. But most of the equipment was already falling apart. The machine said they wouldn't last more than 300 days. There was nothing he could do about it for now. Still, he thought he might try to extend the generator's life later on. The ceiling of the place was strong, and being underground made it harder for dangerous creatures to get inside. Most importantly, Yunos could still use electricity, even if only a little. It was just right for a secret base. He decided that this place would become the stronghold for his empire. Without wasting time, he placed most of his items inside the storage room. Now he had to return to Alquell and bring back a few more supplies. Before anything else, Yunos went back to check on the elves to refill his boobies energy. He noticed the elven children were causing trouble again during bath time. They had come up with a silly plan. Some of them distracted the older elf girl with a fish, while another tried to pull her clothes down. She attempted to scold them, but she ended up getting pushed over, and at the same time, one of the kids tugged her clothes into the water. The children burst out laughing while the elf girl asked for her clothes back. Yunos was clearly entertained, especially when he saw number 6 in her birthday suit. He started looking forward to whatever prank the kids would come up with next. Watching the elves like this made Yunos feel that they weren't much different from humans. As someone from the Empire, he couldn't help having mixed feelings about that. Still, he thought that building a good relationship with the elves might actually be a smart idea. After all, elves lived for a very long time. If he got close to them, he might be able to learn what really happened 200 years ago. But there was one problem. He wouldn't get far if he couldn't understand their language. Even so, he chose not to rush anything. After all, he only came to enjoy the view. Meanwhile, in the capital city of the Canaan Kingdom, Recall, Arngale was feeling overwhelmed by a pile of documents on his desk. As he tried to focus, someone knocked on the door. He allowed them to come in. It was Marcus, the captain of the Golden Amber Mercenary Group. He said he could already feel Arngale's bad mood from outside. Arngale then explained that a new order to eliminate a strange species had just been issued. The mission would be a joint effort with the local army. Marcus wasn't surprised. He had expected this to happen. He remembered hearing about this new monster. It only attacked merchant convoys, but strangely, it only targeted the bandits traveling with them. Marcus felt it was too early for the kingdom to decide on a full extermination. Arngale believed the decision was made out of pride. One of the items stolen by the monster was a replica of C's water source. That replica was supposed to be a symbol for a new town being built in the south. Arngale couldn't understand why they were being ordered to fight an unknown creature over something like that. There wasn't even enough information about it. He felt like the kingdom didn't care about the lives of the mercenaries at all. He said it might have been acceptable if there had been a high reward, but if the mission succeeded, the army would get all the credit. If it failed, the mercenaries would be blamed. He was frustrated and couldn't believe such unfairness was happening in the country. Marcus told him not to blame himself too much. He said Arngale had done what he could. Then, Marcus explained that his group, Gold and Amber, would not take part in the mission. He didn't mind what would happen to him, but he refused to risk the lives of the younger members. Arngale said he would have done the same if he were in Marcus's position. He hoped other groups would choose to step back too, if possible. Marcus then remembered that Daybreak Battlefield had no choice but to join. They were the only group that had already fought the monster before. If Orlando from Daybreak went, then Grant from the mercenary group Immovable would likely join as well. He often competed with Orlando, so he wouldn't stay out of it. Since Grant was very skilled, Marcus wasn't too worried about him. He added that when people get older, they tend to become more cautious. He jokingly wondered if he should call it the Whispers of the Land. Even though he hadn't seen the monster with his own eyes, he could sense that it belonged to a world humans were not meant to step on. It gave off a feeling that it was beyond what they should try to face. Soon after, Yunos woke up to the sound of elf number 6 calling him in the morning. She had been taking care of Yunos' little one while he was asleep. For a moment, Yunos felt overjoyed. He was happy to see his partner again, but that moment didn't last. It turned out to be just a short dream. When he fully woke up, he checked his body and realized there was still nothing between his legs. He expected that. The day before, he had run as fast as he could all the way to Airquell. It left him so tired that he went straight to bed without doing anything else. This was the first time his body had ever felt that tired. He spent more time searching through the buildings and found many items used in daily life. He even found some home appliances that worked with electricity. To his surprise, there was a large TV that still looked good. Yunos had always enjoyed watching movies on a big screen like that. Still, he wasn't sure if the data discs were still working. While checking the place, he also found a video camera. This made him imagine the kind of scenes he could film and keep forever. But then, darker thoughts crossed his mind. He remembered that things like peeking and filming people without permission were crimes. A part of him argued there were no laws anymore, so it was fine. But another part reminded him that using such inventions for something bad was still wrong. Yunos knew there were lines he should never cross as a person. But since he no longer saw himself as human, he felt those rules didn't apply to him anymore. He told the elves to wait, saying the Empire's technology would shine again in high definition. He checked the catalog and found a newer model with zoom and many extra features. But after searching through the display and even the back rooms, he found that it was out of stock. He had no choice but to settle for a different one. So he planned to go to Jisvaya, a place known for selling electronics. He didn't care how far it was, he would run the distance if needed. He also carried the TV and a disc player with him. For the sake of his curiosity, he rushed back to his base to set everything up, ignoring the goblins he passed along the way. Yunos quickly arrived in Jisvaya. He thought it would be a waste if he found nothing after traveling such a long way. As he looked around, he saw a large orc's body hanging from a traffic light post. Right away, he understood it was meant to warn people not to enter the area. Suddenly, a monster appeared from behind and tried to attack him by surprise, but Yunos blocked it without much effort. The monster stepped back. When he got a better look, he realized it was a red ogre. This type was much smarter and stronger than normal ogres. Yunos knew it would be a real problem if this creature showed up while he was still trying to find the camera. For now, he focused on the fight. He challenged the ogre and made it angry on purpose. The ogre charged at him. Yunos blocked the punch, but it was strong enough to push him back. It was the first time he had faced someone with this kind of raw strength. Instead of being scared, he felt excited. He had been waiting to fight someone strong in close combat. Yunos tried to fight back, but the ogre hit him with a powerful uppercut. For a moment, he was stunned. The ogre used that chance to land more hits, turning Yunos into a punching bag. Then the ogre tried to finish the fight with a high kick, but Yunos stopped it with just one arm and grabbed its leg. That was the moment he realized this wasn't just a match. It was a fight where only one would walk away. He crushed the monster's leg and hoped it wouldn't hold a grudge. Then he threw a strong body punch and followed it with a series of fast right jabs, all while holding its leg in place. The ogre lost a lot of blood and started coughing it up. Yunos finally let go, and the monster collapsed. As he stepped on it, the ogre started begging for its life. But Yunos stomped down and ended the fight for good. He believed the ogre brought it on itself and no excuse could change that. Even though he got hurt in the fight, the injuries healed quickly. At that moment, Yunos felt like he could finally call himself the strongest being on land. Now that Yunos no longer had to worry about future problems, it was time to find a good quality camera. He walked into the electronics store and quickly spotted what he needed. He held the video camera up and spun around in excitement. Just to be safe, he bought 2 of the same model and picked up 50 blank discs for recording. With that, his filming setup was complete. Since he was already in the store, he decided to check out some movie discs. He walked around the video section, browsing through many titles. But one part of the store caught his eye. A section with a banner labeled 18+. Yunus didn't say a word. He quietly walked through the curtains like something was pulling him in. By the end of his shopping trip, Yunus had bought 2 video cameras, 50 blank discs, 3 regular movies, and a huge pile of 18+ films, all with translations. He later tried to explain to us that his favorite gravure idol had recently switched to that kind of work. He also claimed he was just testing the discs to see if they actually worked. According to him, the genre didn't matter at all. He wanted to start watching right away, but he told himself not to rush. It wouldn't feel right if he didn't give the actresses his full attention. But first it was time to eat. Once the meat was cooked through, Yunus sprinkled some Canaan salt on top. He placed the food nicely on the plates he had picked out earlier. His special dish, Yunus-style deer steak, was ready. Even though it was just plain grilled meat, he took a bite and happily said the salt made it taste amazing. He believed that using spices to remove the smell could make it even better next time. After finishing his meal, Yunus washed the dishes. If the viewers were paying close attention, you would have noticed that the place had both electricity and running water. Since Yunus was used to fetching water from the river, having water on tap felt like a big upgrade. After that came the main event. Yunus sat in front of the TV that was connected to the disc player. The moment he had been waiting for had finally arrived. His hands shook more than usual as he held a disc. On the cover was a big-chested woman. He carefully placed the disc into the player, hoping it would work. Sadly, the TV only showed loud static. Yunus wasn't too surprised since he expected some of the discs might not work after all this time. Still, he didn't give up. He tried other discs, especially the ones that featured his favorite gravure model, but they all showed the same noisy screen. Nothing worked. He even tested a disc that had foreign women with large chests on the cover, but it failed too. That was when Yunus realized something worse. The video cameras were broken as well. Oddly enough, one of the cameras still had its light on, and it started recording. Yunus quickly took the disc it had just recorded and tried playing it on the TV, but it showed nothing but static again. That was the moment he let out a painful scream, louder than when the red ogre had hit him before. He couldn't believe the discs had not survived after 200 years. He also couldn't believe that the Empire's technology wasn't advanced enough to preserve something so simple. Still, maybe it wasn't the discs. Maybe the problem was the player itself. Yunus thought about returning to Erkel immediately, but then he stopped, frozen by the sight of one disc cover showing blonde women with big chests. A sudden thought came to him. He wanted to try another disc player as soon as possible. Maybe, just maybe, one day he would be able to film and actually watch those adult videos. A small spark of hope lit up inside him. He knew if he lost that hope, he might lose his mind. For now, he chose to rest. One day, when he became strong enough to handle even the loss of hope, he would definitely search for a new disc player. That night, Yunus had a peaceful dream. In it, elves number 6 and number 8 wore tiny bikinis and laughed while playing on a sunny beach. It was a joyful dream, but it also carried a quiet sadness. Yunus had been through a lot before, but he knew he couldn't stay sad forever. Wanting to make his life better, he went back to the Canaan highway to collect some free salts. When he got there, he saw 3 wagons that couldn't move and noticed signs that people had been around. Since the wagons were stuck, he decided it was time to act, even without using his camouflage skills. He didn't hide himself from the humans this time. Some men unexpectedly left with a working wagon. Yunus was surprised. The way they ran off felt strange but also oddly refreshing. He didn't understand it, but it felt real somehow. Then he decided to check the other wagons for anything useful. One of the bags had dried meat, but it had a strange smell, almost like chemicals. That's when he realized it was a trap. Right after that, the army from the Canaan kingdom showed up. There were even more mercenaries with them. He counted around 500 people in total. Yunus had already thought something like this might happen because he kept raiding Canaan, but he didn't expect it so soon. He began thinking about what to do. Running away wasn't a good idea because always escaping wouldn't solve anything. It would just make the problem last longer. He still had a few choices: hold back at first and fight later, or go all in and take out as many as he could. But no matter which one he picked, the nobles of Canaan would be furious. It became clear to him that moving around Canaan was going to be much harder now. People would be more careful, and there would be fewer wagons passing through. Yunus sat down for a moment to think. Then, the local army commander began mocking him for falling into their trap. He swore that Yunus would regret making them his enemies. Hearing this, Yunus got angry and stood up. He knew he would deal with his sudden burst of emotion later, but for now, he decided to face them directly, just as they wanted. The archers looked nervous, but the commander ordered them to fire anyway. Unfortunately for them, their arrows had no effect. They bounced harmlessly off Yunos's body. He figured this was when they would turn to their hired fighters. Soon, a man riding a horse appeared from behind. Yunos noticed that he carried a halberd and hoped the man would put up a good fight. The rider charged without stopping. Yunos quickly understood that the man was trying to land a hit, escape, and then follow up with magic. Before he could run, Yunos grabbed the halberd tightly. To his surprise, the rider let go of both his weapon and his horse right away. That caught Yunos off guard. At that moment, several fireballs came raining down on him. When they exploded, the local knights began to cheer, thinking they had won, but Yunos remained completely unharmed. He realized the mages weren't very strong or skilled. He prepared to move, but the halberd had already disappeared from his hands. The rider had somehow called it back and swung it straight at Yunos's face. This time, the blade managed to cut him. Yunos was shocked. He figured the weapon must be enchanted and could return to its owner automatically. He found that idea interesting. Yunos got ready to fight seriously and struck back. The rider smiled, clearly enjoying the battle. Yunos expected that kind of reaction. Most mercenaries loved fighting. Seeing their leader engaged, the other mercenaries joined in. Yunos decided it was time to end the fight and leave. He tried to punch the rider, but the man flipped backward and dodged it perfectly. Yunos was impressed and started to admire him a little. Still, he had no plans to let him escape. When the rider tried to block Yunos's next punch, he was hit hard, bounced off the ground, and coughed up blood. Yunos looked around and wondered who would challenge him next, since he planned to go after them himself. The local knight commander, now angry, called the mercenaries useless, and ordered the archers and mages to surround Yunos and bring him down. Just when Yunos thought things were finally starting to feel like a real battlefield, he heard a familiar voice call out to him. It was Orlando, and he showed up with his men, saying it had been a while. Seeing Orlando again made Yunos shake. Their last fight had left a scar on him, both in body and mind. His patience broke and he rushed toward Orlando in anger. To his surprise, Orlando dodged all his attacks with ease. Yunos noticed that Orlando had learned something from their first battle. Instead of blocking, he now focused only on avoiding hits. Yunos couldn't help but feel a bit impressed, but he still promised himself that he would land a punch no matter what. Before he could get close, a fireball came out of nowhere and hit him from the side. It didn't hurt him, but it left him confused and frozen in place. Orlando took the chance to strike, but quickly pulled back when Yunos tilted his head in a strange way. That small move startled Yunos. He had always believed mages were weak, but this time he was fooled into letting his guard down. Someone strong was hiding behind the group of mages. Orlando kept attacking and told Yunos to focus on him. More sword fighters joined the battle. Yunos started to feel annoyed. It was becoming too difficult to fight both the mage and all these new enemies at once. Just then, the local knight commander shouted for the archers to get ready. The mercenaries panicked and ran. Yunos looked at the knights and thought they were being foolish. From where he stood, it was clear the knights and the mercenaries were not working together at all. While arrows flew toward him, Yunos noticed someone running straight through them. It was beauty number 5, the wild blonde woman he had met before. He thought she should have already known that magic swords didn't work on him. She smiled and threw something at him. Yunos quickly jumped out of the way, thinking it might be poison. Just then, a large fireball came flying at him. Caught off guard, Yunos instinctively smacked it down to the ground. Everyone, including the mage who cast the spell, was shocked. Yunos stood still, trying to calm himself. The mercenaries couldn't believe what they had just seen. They started to doubt if they could even win. How could a man hit a powerful spell like that out of the air? Yunos felt a cold sweat run down his back. That kind of magic could have seriously hurt him. He guessed it came from the same mage who attacked earlier. Still, for the first time since getting his new body, he felt excited. A smile formed on his face. He got into a sumo stance and glared at the knights, ready to stop holding back. He wanted them to attack him like their lives depended on it. Just the look in his eyes was enough to make the knights tremble in fear. Without waiting, they scattered in different directions, running for their lives. Yunos suddenly felt sad. He had hoped for a real fight, but they were already giving up. He let out a loud roar. Some knights were so terrified they nearly wet themselves and cried out for their mothers. The commander shouted at them to return to their positions, but it was no use. Yunos called the Canaan army worthless. Still, a few brave knights tried to fight back. The local knight commander stepped forward, but Yunos easily knocked them out. He told them to stop pretending to be knights. That was all it took. Every last knight turned and ran as fast as they could. That was the end of the Canaan army. Only the mercenaries were left. Among the group of mages, Diera let out a long sigh. After that, Yunos went after the mercenaries, and Orlando told his team that he would go in first. Fireballs flew toward Yunos, but he didn't even react. Orlando rushed at him, swinging a large greatsword. Yunos dodged the attack and punched him. Surprisingly, Orlando blocked the punch with his sword. The other mercenaries tried to surround Yunos, but he saw them coming. He He took them down one by one without much trouble. Even Orlando was defeated. As the mercenaries dropped to the ground, Yunos wondered if it was finally over. He had held back during the fight, so he believed most of them would survive. Anyone who didn't was probably just unlucky. Suddenly, a huge crystal came flying at him. The crash echoed across the battlefield. A female mage nearby was breathing heavily after casting the powerful spell. Luckily, Yunos blocked the crystal just in time. If it had hit him directly, it could have seriously hurt him. He was surprised that someone still had enough energy to use such a strong attack. He looked at the group of mages and noticed one woman who stood out. Her invisibility had faded, likely because she had used all her energy. Yunos decided to walk over and see her face. Orlando could only watch as Yunos approached Diera. Yunos took off her hat and Diera quickly tried to slash his neck, but Yunos reacted fast and caught her with his large hands. He was surprised she still had a trick left. As she struggled in his grip, he noticed the way her chest moved with each motion. For a moment he got distracted and didn't understand what she was saying. He shook her again, and her body's reaction caught his attention. Then, he felt something was off. He looked at her more closely and realized he had seen her before. The two Himalayas before him were the same ones he had seen in Chapter 2. It finally made sense. This was the same mage Diera. Diera looked at him with anger and disgust. Meanwhile, inside a church in Caesarea, Lena continued to pray. She felt a strong and uneasy feeling deep inside her that wouldn't go away. She wished her older brother Angista could keep Diera safe from harm. Sadly, her fears became real. At that very moment, Diera was being held tightly like a doll in Yunos's hand. She kept trying to break free from him. Yunos couldn't remember what her face looked like, but when he saw her chest and heard her speak in the Caesarean language, he became sure. She was the same person he remembered from before. He called her his first Opai-san. He thought the only reason she followed him so far was because he had something she wanted. Even so, he believed he had already paid her back. Earlier, he had taken a potion from her and it helped him stay alive. In his mind, that was enough to make things even. When Yunos saw how lazy and uncaring the knights were, he chose to carry Diera into the deeper parts of the forest. The knights felt happy they didn't have to fight anymore, especially since it was just over one female mercenary. They pulled back and told the other mercenaries to take care of the rest of the battle. They even said those mercenaries were mostly useless. Orlando didn't know what to say, he was too shocked to argue with them. Diera kept yelling at Yunos to let her go. She thought he was either planning to eat her, literally, or eat her differently. The thought of being violated by a monster scared her and she kept fighting back, telling Yunos to just kill her instead. She said she would never give in to him. But then she stopped for a moment, confused, when Yunos gently placed her on the ground. While he was digging through his bag, Diera thought about using the moment to fight back. But then, to her surprise, he quietly knelt in front of her and handed her the sword she had been searching for. He made a soft, calm sound that didn't seem threatening. Diera couldn't believe what was happening, but she still reached out and took the sword. Her hands shook as she pulled it close to her chest and held it tightly. After that, Yunos chose to walk away and leave her alone. As she watched him leave, Diera felt a mix of emotions. Anger rose in her again and she shouted that humans were not his playthings. That night, Yunos sat in front of a small campfire. His thoughts returned to Diera, not to her face but to the sight of her exposed chest. He remembered how she refused to cover herself even at the end, and he felt a strange sense of admiration for her stubborn nature. Still, he doubted she felt anything similar toward him. He noticed it only then. Humanity would never accept someone like him. He understood this because he had once been human himself. The day had been interesting, but when he looked back, it felt more like a simple workout than a real fight. Calling it a battle seemed too much. His power had grown far beyond what humans could accept. With these thoughts in mind, he realized he still carried a small hope of living among people even as a monster. He wondered if such a future was possible. The thought made his emotions twist inside him, but his passive skill slowly settled his mind. He scratched his head and decided it was time to eat. After that fight, his threat level would rise fast. Canaan would increase its security, and trade would slow down. He needed to avoid the city for a while. Even so, news moved slowly, and this confusion could become a good chance for him. He felt eager for morning to come so he could make one last profit trip. With that thought, he lay down and went to sleep. Meanwhile, Diera held her friend's sword and kept it close to her arms. Lloyd told the others to place the seriously hurt people onto the wagons, while those with lighter wounds should stay alert. Beauty number 5 checked on Orlando. While leaning on a tree, Orlando claimed he felt fine compared to the ones inside the wagon. Lloyd noted that the number of casualties was lower than they feared and believed they had fought well. Orlando let out a weak laugh. He said Lloyd was smarter than him and should have known better. He then grew serious and said they were only being toyed with. The operation had a total of 557 people. Out of them, 456 were injured, and 18 were declared dead. This strange ratio showed that the new type of monster was not even taking them seriously. Even so, The territory knights claimed the outcome happened because of their own efforts, and the Lord agreed with them. Just as Arngale feared, the blame for the failure was pushed onto the mercenary guild. The Lord announced that the group Dawn's battlefield would be punished for hiding information while fighting the new species of monster, which was treated as a serious mistake. Arngale shouted in anger and struck the table. He had already told them the monster carried a magic sword and had strong intelligence. He gave them everything he knew. Since there had been no real wars after the Great War with the Empire, the mercenary guild's position had weakened. The guild accepted state control to avoid being removed, and now Arngale no longer had the strength to protect the mercenaries. He felt sorry for Orlando. In the end, another mercenary band faded away. In the Canaan Kingdom's city of Lecter, Diera walked through the streets while thinking about the new kind of monster. The more she thought about it, the less she understood. She wondered what that creature truly was. Their country had dealt with monsters since ancient times, and monster research had grown with each generation. She believed she already knew a lot, but the new monster they faced was strange in every way. The creature remembered her and Orlando. She wondered if it was smart enough to recognize people by their faces and voices. She could not be sure because she only heard about monsters like that in old stories. It seemed more likely that there was something about them that the creature found unusual. She heard from the mercenaries that Orlando left a strong impression on it. Still, she questioned why it took their magic sword. As she thought about it, she realized it might be connected to the fruit she carried the whole time. She held them and wondered if these were what the monster wanted. At that moment, Orlando approached her and she noticed Edward walking beside him. She told them that stopping her was useless because she had already finished what she needed to do. Orlando apologized and said he could not let her return home that way anymore. In another place, a pair of reptilian eyes watched from the shadows. Meanwhile, Lena continued to pray for Diera. Edward got hit in the face by Diera. She demanded to know what he just said. Edward quietly wiped the blood from his nose and told her they received a mission to hunt the giant viper. That was the exact mission given to them as punishment from Dawn's battlefield. He feared telling her that she was now part of Dawn. If she tried to escape this mission, she would be marked as a criminal forever. He understood she wanted to return home right away, but leaving Canaan now would be very hard for her. Diera asked what he meant by punishment. She said that creature was a moving disaster and that even at full strength they barely stood a chance against it. She felt this mission was almost a death sentence. She also said the knights were the ones giving orders and should be the ones blamed. She asked if they were really going to stay quiet and let the knights throw the mercenaries away. Orlando scratched his head and apologized. He explained this was how Canaan worked now. He tightened his fist as he said that if they ran away, the kingdom would chase them until the end. It would also make things worse for the other mercenaries. If both choices led to ruin, he would rather face the monster. For that, he needed Diera's help. Diera realized she had no choice. She worried about Lena, whom she had left behind. At the same time, Yunos ate some meat. He felt happy because it tasted good, thanks to the black pepper he grabbed in Canaan. It helped cover the strong gamey taste. The tiny pepper mill from the mall had been hard to use with his big hands, but it was worth the trouble. Because of that, he ended up eating seasoned meat for 3 days in a row. In the end, he grew tired of it and started craving vegetables. Back when he was human, he thought meat was all he ever needed. But after days of eating only that, he now wanted some greens more than anything. He wondered if his body was feeling a nutritional craving. He also thought it would be nice to have some fruit. He still had sugar from Canaan, so he could even make a simple compote. If he wanted fruits and vegetables, he wondered if the elves could provide some. In this world, elves were not vegetarians and ate a balanced diet that included meat. Even so, fighting elves just to get food sounded like a foolish plan. It was too risky, and Caesarea's farmland in the south was not an option. Yunos personally disliked the south. Because of this, Yunos had no choice but to return to Canaan. He wanted to keep a low profile for a while longer, but he felt forced to move. He believed he could sneak into a remote farming village without being noticed. Many pioneers living deep in the countryside were criminals sent there as punishment, so he would not feel guilty causing trouble. He had already memorized a few possible spots from a detailed map back at the base. That facility likely still held some treasure, so he planned to raid it again when he had time. Before heading to his main target, the blank zone northeast of Emriade, he went to spend one night at his elf observation outpost. It was basically a cliff near the river that worked well for watching from a distance. Yunos had an excuse. He did not know where the next supply point was, so he needed water. He had also been neglecting his surveillance duties for a while. His true motivation in life had always been the sight of boobs, and he considered that important. It was a bit early in the day, but he believed he should head there anyway. Yunos reached his usual watching spot and sat down while he waited for someone to appear. Many hours passed, yet no one came. He wondered what had happened and tried to calm himself. He reminded himself that an Imperial soldier had to stay calm in moments like this. He chose to stay for one more night. When the second day arrived, no elves came to bathe in the river. Yunos kept his faith and decided to wait one more day. But the next day arrived and still not a single elf appeared. He assumed something had happened. He thought the elves might have noticed him and stopped coming. Still, he believed they were not the type to change their routine because of one monster sighting. He wondered if a bigger problem had kept them away. His curiosity grew, yet he knew he could not do anything against the Einherjar. He guessed his surveillance work was on hold until the elves fixed whatever issue they faced. He told himself it was only temporary and that he would see those two beings again. For now, he needed to gather vegetables and return to Canaan. He looked forward to eating fresh greens. Or so he tried to tell himself, but he was running low on what he called boob power and moved slowly. He took more time than he expected. His first target spot was empty, and the area felt deserted. His guess about the farming village was correct, though. When night came, he chose to camp and head to the next place in the morning. Sadly, the second location was also empty. Yunos tried to calm himself because more possible sites were nearby. He tried to remember the places up north and the ones past that. He also tried to recall the southeastern spots. He felt disappointed that he had not been able to write a memo because of his huge hands. His body was supposed to be superior, but it could not hold a pen. He felt he needed to fix his clumsiness soon. For now, he decided to head southeast. Yunos soon reached a village, or what used to be one. It did not look ruined. There were no people, yet the place still looked lived in. He assumed the village had been abandoned only recently. There were signs of destruction, though, as if something huge had crashed through the area. He noticed the same marks in the first village. It was not a result of war. It was clearly the work of a monster. What worried him was the lack of broken fences and the absence of any real signs of resistance. Yunos went into detective mode. He assumed a monster had moved close enough to strike without anyone noticing, even though it was large. Since there were no bloodstains or smell left behind, he believed it had swallowed everyone whole. He concluded that a shadow viper was responsible. He remembered it was a giant snake with mimicry abilities and wondered if one lived nearby. If it came to a direct fight, Yunos felt confident he could defeat it. His tail moved a little when he found some vegetables, but the crops were not ready for harvest, and the warehouse had been raided by rats. This village was a failure too, so he had no choice but to cross the northern mountains. As he continued his trek, Yunos heard human footsteps. He counted about 20 of them. He thought they might be survivors from the village. Even with his zoom functions, the thick trees blocked his view, so he moved closer. But as he stepped forward, he hit a slope and lost his balance. He slid down and got flustered. When he stood back up, he blamed his recent bad luck and even joked to himself about the lack of boob power. Then he noticed familiar faces. It was Orlando and his mercenary group. Yunos could not believe he had run into people he knew this deep in the mountains. He wondered if his luck had truly run out. Since he thought they were villagers at first, he had not bothered using his camouflage skill. Orlando prepared to fight and complained that Yunos chose the worst time to appear. Beauty number 5 guessed the monster came because she still carried Orlando's smell. Edward and the others agreed. Orlando accepted the blame without hesitation. Yunos saw that they were ready to defend themselves, yet they also seemed unwilling to fight. He thought dealing with them would be tiring. If they planned to run away, he actually preferred that. Someone suddenly told them to wait. It was Diera. She walked toward Yunos with steady steps. When he looked at her chest, he finally remembered she was the woman with the magic sword. To his surprise, Diera pulled off the clothing on her upper body and showed her melons to him. Yunos froze. He never expected her to attack by showing her melons right away. After a short moment, she ended the show and fixed her clothes. Yunos wondered why she did that. He thought it might be her way of thanking him for returning the sword, but he doubted it. There was no reason for her to expect a monster to understand human manners. Then he realized she probably knew he only recognized her because of her large chest. He wished he could apologize. Diera lifted her staff and used the tip to draw on the ground. When Yunos looked down, he saw a picture of a snake. He wondered if she meant a snake monster or the shadow viper. She made more gestures, pointing at herself, then at the others, then at him. In the end, she stabbed the drawing of the snake. She reached out her hand toward Yunos, asking for his help. Edward looked confused and wondered if she had finally lost her mind. Yunos understood that she wanted help to defeat the snake. He could see how desperate she was as she asked a strange monster for support. The situation must have been bad for her, or maybe she wanted him to kill the monster for her. He then wondered what he would gain from doing this. In the past, he might have thought helping them could build a bond with humans, but he had already given up on that idea. Orlando angrily asked if Diera had lost her mind for asking the new species for help. Diera angrily told him to be quiet. Yunos felt impressed when he heard her speak Canaanite well. Diera said she would do anything if it meant she could go home. She held on to her promise that she would return to Lena's side. Orlando could not reply. Yunos stayed quiet for a moment before trying to ask what he would gain from helping. but only a growl came out of his mouth. He then sat down and searched through his backpack. Diera felt confused as she watched him. He pulled out a bottle of blue potion with one hand and opened his other hand to show the number he wanted. Diera felt shocked. Yunos wanted 5 bottles of potion. She realized he understood her completely and that he was now trying to negotiate. Yunos noticed that her face turned pale, and he understood why. Everyone believed monsters had no real intelligence, so this moment broke her old view of the world. Diera asked Edward how many blue potions they had. Edward said there were 2. With her own supply included, she believed they had only 3 to offer. She then faced Yunos and drew 3 bottles on the ground. Yunos assumed that was all they had. He chose to push the trade further and searched his backpack again. He then took out a green potion and raised 2 fingers to show his next demand. Diera's face brightened when she understood, and she drew 2 more bottles on the ground to confirm she had them. Yunos felt pleased and picked Diera up with his huge hand. Orlando and the others froze in shock. To their surprise, Yunos gently placed her on his shoulder. Diera did not resist, which showed her strong resolve. Yunos realized she had real courage. She almost slipped from his shoulder, so she leaned forward and pushed herself closer to his head, which accidentally pressed her chest against his face. He noticed her hesitation at first, but now he felt certain she had become his number 7. Diera then asked him to move with care, and Yunos felt the serious mood fade away. She later jumped off his shoulder and told Orlando that the deal had been made. Orlando struggled to believe they had formed an agreement with a monster. He wondered if they could even trust one. Diera admitted she did not know, but she refused to give up and die the way their enemies wanted. She believed everyone felt the same. She thought it was time to catch those knights by surprise. Now that they had the strongest ally, it was time to show what they could do. As they traveled, the mercenaries kept watching Yunos with worry as he followed behind them. In exchange for magic potions, he helped them with the monster extermination. From what he overheard, he understood how hard their situation was. They were blamed for failing the mission to subdue him, and now they were sent on what was clearly a suicide mission disguised as another extermination job. Based on what Diera had said earlier, the group planned to crush the noble's scheme, even if it meant using a monster like him. Yunos only meant to help because of the magic potions, but he did not dislike how things were turning out. Even so, he knew their chances against a shadow viper were low even with the captain and Diera. Its camouflage would make it dangerous, and he believed it was a mutant. After watching longer and from closer up, he noticed more about Diera. She didn't only have huge tatas but also round peaches behind her. He was liking what he was seeing. Yunos did not realize when they finally reached their destination. His focus had stayed on Diera, and he failed to notice they had stopped in an open area that looked like a good place to camp. He walked toward her while she prepared their campsite. She looked worried when he approached. For some reason, Yunos wanted to break the calm and strong-willed look she always showed. He lifted her with his large hands and set her down on a nearby rock. She looked confused, trying to understand what he wanted. She seemed to think he expected her to stand guard even though she still had work to finish. 30 minutes later, the mercenaries felt both confused and amazed by what they saw. Yunos returned carrying 2 wild boars for lunch. Diera realized he had gone out to find food, but she also noticed that he brought back a shovel, a hatchet, and ropes. She clearly knew what those tools were for, so seeing a monster carry them shocked her. Yunos butchered the wild boars, hung them on a nearby tree branch, and drained the blood. The mercenaries stared in disbelief. A monster had caught prey, drained its blood, and even dug a pit. As they kept watching, their shock only grew. The monster began building a stove. Orlin gave a dry laugh and said nothing surprised him anymore. Diera still struggled to accept what she was seeing. A monster was calmly preparing his own meal. Yunos sliced the meat and grilled it over the fire. The mercenaries could hardly believe their eyes. Diera's thoughts were already in chaos, and this only made it worse. Yunos sprinkled salt and pepper over the meat. That was when Diera finally snapped. The whole scene felt wrong to her no matter how she tried to understand it. Suddenly, a piece of meat landed in her mouth. Yunos watched her chew the seasoned meat while she pumped her fist without thinking. After swallowing, she reacted with confusion, unable to understand why a monster was carefully cooking and seasoning food like a person. Her words came out broken, which made it easier for Yunos to follow, though he pretended not to understand. He offered her another bite, but she refused with anger. He seemed amused by her reaction and watched her closely. He kept staring at her tatas. He wondered if it was fine for him to slip his finger on those gaps and if being a monster could excuse such actions. The other mercenaries began to see Yunos differently. He no longer felt like just a terrifying creature. They started to find him oddly interesting, even somewhat familiar. Orlin wondered if that was truly the case. In truth, he felt even more uneasy now. Still, after what they had just faced, they had almost no chance against the giant viper. The battle had been lost from the start. Because of that, he chose to place his hope on the unlikely choice of letting the monster travel with them. After their meal, Yunos wiped his body with a sterilized cloth. The mercenaries stared in disbelief. They saw that a monster looked cleaner and more hygienic than their own captain. Orlando apologized for it. Dira could not understand how a monster cared so much about cleanliness. Yunos noticed her watching. He tossed her a wet towel and signaled for her to use it. Dira sniffed the towel with irritation, but she realized it was fresh and unused. She wiped her chest and armpits. As she did, Yunos clasped his hands and began to tear up. The energy he had failed to regain from the elves was now returning because of Dira. Then he suddenly sensed something and turned serious. Dira saw him staring toward the nearby woods. Yunos heard something crawling through the trees. It was getting closer. He could not see the creature because it blended with its surroundings, but the heavy creaking of branches told him it was about 20 meters long. He believed it was the viper they were hunting. But the shadow viper he knew only grew to around 10 meters. This one had to be a mutant. He also noticed how Dira reacted to his tension. He assumed he would soon be working for the potions again. Dira could not see or hear anything, but she felt that something was near. Orlando quickly told everyone to wake up. He warned them that something was moving in the trees. A pair of bright eyes flashed from the darkness of the woods. The ground scraped as something unseen slithered forward. Yunos felt the monster suddenly speed up. He guessed it planned to attack using its momentum. One of the mercenaries did not know where it was coming from and failed to notice it striking from above. Orlando tried to warn them, but it was too late. A giant viper swallowed one of the mercenaries whole. The monster then vanished again, turning invisible. Orlando told the others to chase it, but they could not. It had disappeared from sight once more. Still, they noticed that Yunos could somehow see the snake and was following its movement. While chasing it, Yunos lost track of its presence and fell behind. Even so, he had already memorized its scent. He thought about thanking Dira, who was preparing magic attacks to support him. He hoped her spells would not hit him. Part of him thought he would punish her if she did, but deep down he would rather take the hit if it meant help in battle. Yunos became so lost in these thoughts that he failed to notice the viper already coiling tightly around his body. He realized too late that he had trapped himself by thinking foolish things. The others saw Dira casting magic and believed Yunos was in serious danger. Orlando simply watched in silence. Yunos, however, thought the viper had saved him the trouble of chasing it. The moment it wrapped around him meant he had already won. He casually punched the viper in the face. The monster dropped but tightened its coils, trying to crush him. Yunos broke free with ease. His strong body pushed against the pressure until the coils loosened. Orlando was shocked. A giant viper's grip was strong enough to crush huge trees, yet Yunos escaped without much effort. He grabbed the viper's scales and tore them out. The viper writhed in pain and tried to escape. Yunos did not let it go. He drove his sharp legs into its body and pinned it to the ground. Then he dug his claws into it and swung the massive creature around. Orlando and the others watched with pale faces as he overpowered the monster. Seeing that the monster no longer moved wildly, Yunos believed his mission was finished. He stepped on its head and struck it with a heavy punch, crushing the monster's skull into pieces. He lifted the lifeless body and thought the viper had been too careless when it approached him. He tried to look calm, but he had almost used his full strength. The viper's coils were powerful, and if it had been any larger, the fight could have turned dangerous. He then noticed a bulge in the viper's stomach. He tore the body in half and pulled out the mercenary who had been swallowed earlier. The mercenary was still alive. Yunos looked toward Orlando and tossed the unconscious man to him. Orlando remembered that the monster still had no name, but he still felt grateful. He believed the mercenary survived because of Yunos. Yunos only recognized the word of thanks. In his mind, he had done it only for the potions, nothing more. Still, he realized it had been a long time since anyone had thanked him. Orlando checked the mercenary and confirmed his life was no longer in danger. Yunos thought he had simply done what needed to be done. It was time to collect the potions and leave. Dira walked up to him and handed over a bag. He checked inside and confirmed the number of potions. Even so, he felt there was one more thing he wanted to do. He removed Dira's wizard hat. She seemed confused, but he then pulled down part of her robe and exposed her tatas, watching the bouncing movement with interest. He smiled, finding it just as amusing as he expected. Dira looked surprised at first. She soon relaxed and showed no sign of anger. Instead, she calmly let him look for a moment. Yunos froze, caught off guard by her reaction. After that, Dira fixed her robe, took back her hat, and gave him a sharp look before returning to the others. Yunos then realized how impressive Dira was. After that, Yunos safely gathered some vegetables and returned to the Imperial headquarters. On the way, he wiped out the goblins near the farming village as payment for the produce. He had collapsed from exhaustion the day before, so that morning he decided to give everything his full effort. He carefully chopped the vegetables and added some meat he had gotten earlier. Soon Chef Yunos' stir-fried wild boar with vegetables was ready. He took a bite and enjoyed how the fat from the wild boar coated the vegetables. He had not expected cabbage and carrots to taste so sweet. Even the meat tasted better than usual. He was surprised that simple salt and pepper could bring out so much flavor. He finished his plate and felt completely satisfied. Still, he quickly found himself wishing for more flavor choices. He missed gourmet food. He thought about sauces and ketchup, but those were unique to the Empire, so other countries likely did not have them. Even if some still existed somewhere in the Empire, he would never risk using seasoning that was 200 years old. If a factory were still running, he could have made them. Since they no longer existed, he would have to make them himself. Luckily, many books were still readable, and he believed some of them would explain how to make seasonings. He realized he had never bothered looking for cookbooks before because he had always read comics instead. His next mission was clear. It was time to visit the mall in Airquell. However, Yunos made a detour to Einherjar and went to his usual hidden viewing spot. Airquell was not going anywhere, and he wanted to check if the elves' problem had been solved. Dara was useful, but there were things only the elves could provide. His hopeful thoughts quickly broke apart. The elves had not returned to the lake. He first assumed they had only changed the time and place of their bath, and that nothing serious had happened. He had never even considered that they might disappear completely. The shock made him lose his calm. He told himself the elves could not escape his watch. He would find their new bathing spot no matter what. As Yunos moved through the forest, he noticed marks on the trees. Some were burned, and others were cut. He believed the burn marks came from magic and the slashes from swords. Arrows also lay scattered on the ground. It did not look like a hunt. It looked like what remained after a battle. He knew humans would not willingly fight the elves, and he could not imagine the elves attacking the monsters they were meant to protect. He believed they must have faced something far stronger than expected. If such a threat appeared, the elves would naturally try to defeat it. He wondered if a monster strong enough to threaten the elves truly existed. He had never sensed anything like that while keeping watch. Creatures powerful enough to make the elves cautious did not appear often. He suddenly heard footsteps coming closer and quickly hid in the bushes. He sensed about 18 people nearby and sharpened his vision. Soon he saw a group of armed elves marching forward. He believed there must be a monster that even the elves could not handle. They were also escorting Miss Elf number 8. Seeing such an important figure brought out like this made him think the situation was serious. His instincts told him something was wrong. Then Miss Elf number 8 turned her face toward his direction, even though she was blindfolded. Yunos felt shocked. He thought she might have sensed him. It could have been a coincidence, but if it was her, that seemed very possible. He knew he could not make a careless move. Still, she did not alert the others about him. He wondered if she had only turned by chance, or maybe she ignored him because his presence felt different from what they were searching for. Soon after, he noticed something ahead of the elves. For a brief moment, the scenery at the edge of his vision warped. Something was hiding itself. He felt uneasy. He could not see it clearly, and there was no sound at all. At first, he thought it might be a shadow viper, but its camouflage was even better than his own or that strange snake from before. He believed this was the creature the elves were hunting. He wanted to warn them. At that moment, Miss Elf number 8 sensed the monster. She tried to alert the others, but she was too late. One male elf suddenly had his arm seized by an invisible tentacle. He was dragged upward, then slammed into the water. Panic spread among the elves as they drew their weapons. Yunos realized the battle had begun. He wondered if Miss Elf number 8 was safe. He did not care about the male elves. He watched as the fight unfolded, but it was completely one-sided. The male elves fell one after another with little resistance. He could not understand why they were not using their strong magic. He guessed the monster had high resistance to magic, making it a natural enemy of elves. Soon half of them were already down. Miss Elf number 8 trembled in fear while praying. Yunos could not watch any longer. He stepped out of hiding and rushed forward. One of the monster's tentacles had grabbed her. He struck the tentacle and freed her from its grip. He found it strange that an imperial soldier like him was saving an elf. As she was thrown aside, he noticed she was wearing white underwear. At the same time, he finally saw the creature clearly. A massive octopus-like monster had been lurking nearby without making any sound. Its camouflage was nearly perfect. The tentacles were clearly dangerous, and saving the elf became his main focus. He ran toward the tentacle holding her and tried to lift it. It was too slimy. He felt annoyed, but he had no choice. He used his claws and fangs to fight back. The octopus felt pain and released the elf from its tentacle. Yunos caught her with his large hands. She quickly held onto his thick arm. Yunos felt a sudden burst of energy when he felt her chest pressing against his biceps. For some reason, he imagined his patriotic father standing in front of him. He felt guilty for liking the Livas even though they were enemies of the Empire. But in his mind, his father accepted Miss Elf number 8 and encouraged him to be honest. Yunos felt surprised for a moment, then felt grateful. He decided to focus on fighting, even while feeling the pressure on his arm. He hoped the elf would keep holding him tightly because it gave him strength. His killing intent rose. He grabbed one of the octopus's tentacles and took a huge bite. The octopus tried to strike back, but Yunos dodged its attacks. He had heard that some people ate octopus, but he never understood why. As he kept chewing while avoiding the creature's strikes, he noticed something strange. He swallowed and his eyes widened. It tasted good. He was shocked by how delicious it was. He wanted more. He gently placed the elf somewhere safe, then turned back toward the octopus. He drooled as hunger filled him. He rushed at it like a wild, starving beast. The octopus tried to defend itself, but Yunos easily caught its tentacles and kept eating. The creature struggled in pain and tried to escape, but Yunos could not stop. The taste overwhelmed him. He wondered why it was so good. He kept eating without thinking until everything went dark. Later, Yunos woke up. Pieces of the giant octopus were scattered around him. Miss Elf was gone. He tried to remember what had happened. He remembered saving Miss Elf number 8 and noticing how soft she felt when she held his arm. He also remembered eating the octopus. He was shocked that he had eaten a monster raw. He realized he had lost control of himself. Something was wrong. He ran as fast as he could to get a bottle of magic potion, but suddenly he felt very sleepy. That was strange for his monster body. He had rested well and eaten properly, so he should not have been tired. He quickly climbed the cliff, knowing something was seriously wrong. He returned to his cave, opened a magic potion and poured it into his mouth. He fell to the ground and hoped it would work. Soon after, Yunos lost consciousness again. When he opened his eyes again, he found himself back in his human form. He sat on a chair in the middle of a white room. His body would not move, and he could not speak. He wondered if he was dreaming. A man in a lab coat suddenly appeared in front of him and began to clap. The man congratulated Yunos. He said that if someone was experiencing this dream, it meant his experiment had worked. He also praised Yunos for surviving by chance. Yunos's face turned pale. He could not forget this man. He was the researcher who had spoken to him the last time he was still human. He was the one who had turned him into a monster. The man said he knew Yunos had many questions, but he explained that the dream was only an implanted memory. There was nothing he could answer. By now he was probably dead. Even if he were alive, he was not sure he could explain anything. Since there was little time, he moved to the main point. If Yunos was seeing this recording, it meant he had absorbed cells from one of their projects. These included the Ultimate Lifeform Project, the Genetically Enhanced Soldier Project, or the Chimer Project. The man said he personally hoped it was from the Ultimate Lifeform Project. He wanted Yunos to see the results for himself. Yunos felt confused by how calmly the man spoke. If the octopus had been a genetically enhanced soldier like him, then it must have once been human. He realized he had killed and eaten a human being. The man then explained that no matter which project it came from, Yunos had gained new power. As an individual, he had become far stronger. That much was certain. Soon their time ran out. The man said their current technology could not keep the recording active any longer. He promised to explain his true objective in the next recording and hoped they would meet again. Yunos refused. He could not accept the thought of eating another creature like that. The man then stated that until Yunos viewed the next recording, the memories from this dream would be sealed. He said there were no hard feelings. Yunos could not believe what he just said. Then just like that, the dream ended. Before the incident, an elf named Ashiru Gardel had been chosen to become the next shrine maiden. When Ashiru learned this, she tore the notice into pieces and cursed the person who had recommended her. That person was Marianne Zasato, also known by Yunos as Miss Elf number 8. Marianne believed Ashiru had taken the man she loved. The man often stared at Ashiru's chest whenever he saw her. Ashiru always looked at him with clear disgust, hoping he would understand and stop. But he kept pursuing her and spoke of marriage. Ashiru refused every time, yet he continued to chase her. Because of this, Marianne accused Ashiru of stealing her man by tempting him with her body. Ashiru began to think that Marianne's jealousy had clouded her judgment. Many people already mocked Ashiru, saying all her strength had gone to her chest instead of her mind. Even so, Ashiru believed Marianne acted far more foolishly than anyone else. The real problem was Marianne's status. She was the young lady of the Zasato family. Her rank gave her power even if she had little else. During the war with the Empire, the Zasato family had only run and hidden. They had taken credit for the achievements of a fallen clan. Because of this, Marianne's behavior did not surprise Ashiru. Still, Ashiru could not believe Marianne had gone this far just to remove her. The role of Shrine Maiden was not an honor, it was a sacrifice. Shrine Maidens were offered to a monster known as the Forest Nightmare. The creature had appeared 10 years earlier and had become the natural enemy of the elves. It had killed or devoured more than 1,000 of them. 1 year ago, the Sword Saint Shubard had wounded it badly, and it had disappeared. Everyone believed it had died, but the nightmare returned. Shubard was now old, and his injuries from the last battle had never fully healed. If the nightmare reached the village again, the damage could be severe. To protect the village, the elves chose Shrine Maidens. Officially, Shrine Maidens were trained to fight the nightmare. They covered their eyes and sharpened their other senses so they could detect the monster's stealth. In truth, they were meant to be eaten far away from the village, drawing the nightmare away from everyone else. When Ashiru understood this, her face turned pale. She did not want to die like that. But her own family, the Gardel household, had little power and no voice in important matters. They could not oppose the decision of the Zasato family. Ashiru's training began. Blindfolded, she started her life as a shrine maiden. At first she thought staying blindfolded for months made no sense. It felt too much for her to handle. During one training session, she was told to point out the directions of nearby elves. She got every direction correct. Even without seeing, she sensed their presence. The others took this as proof that she had become a true shrine maiden. Ashiru never thought of it that way. She barely cared about their praise. Soon the others began planning to defeat the nightmare without asking her. She tried to stop them, but no one listened. She had once believed she could persuade people using her charm, but no one even paid attention anymore. Frustrated, she gave up trying to interfere. Before she realized it, the day to face the nightmare had arrived. The men showed no reaction to her at all. She thought they were foolish for trying to defeat such a terrifying being with only a small group. She wanted to ask for help. She looked toward the people who once admired her, hoping they would step forward. Instead, they avoided her and pretended not to notice. She saw them as unreliable and decided she would handle things herself. Then she sensed movement from across the river. The sound came from the ground, so she knew it was not the nightmare. She felt surprised by how sharp her focus had become. Even the movements of another beast did not escape her notice. Feeling confident, she imagined making a name for herself. Suddenly, she sensed something familiar. It was the nightmare. Panic spread among the elves, and they were defeated with ease. Ashiru could only hear the screams of dying men around her. Fear gripped her because she could not see the attacks. She realized she had been careless. She had not sensed the nightmare until it was already close. Desperate, she begged for help and promised anything in return for her life. She believed she could offer her body if that was the price. She also believed she could live quietly and take care of a home. She only wanted to survive and live in peace. Then a tentacle wrapped around her. Fear overwhelmed her. She admitted she had lied to herself. She only wanted an easy life without work or responsibility. Still, she no longer asked for anything grand. A peaceful life would be enough. She called for help again. She suddenly felt something strike the tentacle that was holding her up. The impact threw her aside and made her feel sick. She wondered if someone had fought back. She wanted to ask for help. If that person saved her, she would accept them as her fated one. The tentacle released Ashiru, and a huge hand caught her. She held onto the arm and decided that this person would be her fated one. She pressed her chest against the arm as an early show of affection. Soon she noticed how thick the arm was. The body felt unnaturally hard, even harder than armor, and far too large. She became so distracted that she almost slipped off. She wished her fated one would be more careful while swinging his arm during the fight. She hoped he would set her down before facing the nightmare seriously. Soon Ashiru felt solid ground under her feet. She assumed her savior had gently placed her down. She noticed how careful he had been and believed he was a true gentleman. She wanted to thank her fated one, but for now she hid behind the trees. If he defeated the nightmare, she planned to press herself close to him and confess her love. When she heard the nightmare screaming, she believed her fated one was winning. She was amazed that someone could fight the nightmare head-on. She thought he must have felt so large because he wore powerful magical armor. She decided he must be a wealthy gentleman who could afford such gear. She made up her mind that he would become her husband. As she kept watching, the nightmare let out louder and more beast-like cries as if it were dying. Ashiru realized her fated one fought like a wild animal. It felt like two monsters were clashing. Still, she could not abandon such a top-tier man over something small. She had grown tired of being a shrine maiden and removed her blindfold. She wanted to see her future husband with her own eyes, but all she saw was a humanoid monster feeding on the dead nightmare. Ashiru froze in shock and slowly fell backward. The Republic of Einherjar was an elf-only nation formed by a gathering of tribes known as clans. They lived in cities called villages carved from the forest. The land around them was covered in thick forests made only of trees they had chosen to grow. Humans believed elves worshipped nature and left it untouched, but that belief was wrong. Nature was harsh. Like humans, elves had to shape it to fit their needs if they wanted to live in peace. Because of this, elves often called themselves forest managers. Others misunderstood this and saw them as guardians of nature, which helped form their current image. As the name Republic suggested, Einherjar had no monarch. National decisions were made by the Council of Sages, a gathering of clan representatives and department leaders. On that day, the council met in one of the villages to discuss the forest nightmare. The discussion quickly turned to the number of victims. The elders argued over the count, each giving a different number. One treated the matter lightly and even joked that if their numbers fell, they only needed to increase them again. Some encouraged others to have more children to make up for the losses. A younger male elf struggled to accept what he was hearing. Among elves, aging began at around 300 years old, and most reached the end of their lives at about 400. Half of the 24 representatives were already over 300. Because of this, even an important meeting about the future of their people often lost focus. Distractions like these had become a daily occurrence. A calm voice asked everyone to return to the main issue. The meeting was led by Manus, a mature elf woman. She said their biggest problem was the nightmare. If they did not deal with it, their home would remain in danger. She asked if anyone had a better plan. Someone brought up the idea of fully healing the Sword Saint's injuries. Manus questioned why they were still depending on someone who was 388 years old. She believed they could no longer rely on Shubard. Still, others insisted that only he could stand against the nightmare. They believed that if he could no longer fight, they would be finished. Manus let out a quiet sigh. She wished the younger generation would take responsibility, but she felt it was unlikely. They had grown up in peace and had never known war. Then a man named Kashial raised his hand. He said he had prepared a shrine maiden which had bought them more time. Because of this, he believed there was no need to rush their decision. Manus reacted with anger at the thought that he had created another shrine maiden. Kashial confirmed that his daughter had found someone with the right talent. Manas questioned what kind of talent a shrine maiden truly needed. She supported encouraging the younger generation, but she disliked their desire to gain power in this way. It was not just casual. Many elves of Zasato had become too focused on their own gain. She did not welcome their growing influence or their hunger for power. Another member suggested they should finally create a real plan to defeat the nightmare, especially now that they had more time. Manas agreed, and the mood in the room settled. Ideas began to pour in. Some suggested using ballistas. Others proposed throwing rocks with catapults, or setting traps. But several elders refused these ideas. They did not want to copy what they saw as the crude methods of humans. Manas could not hold back her frustration. Since the war against the Empire, the elves had grown soft from years of peace. She doubted that the old methods of war would even work in their current situation. 10 years had passed since the nightmare first appeared, yet the council's meetings still led nowhere. She wondered if they would delay the decision once again. Just then, someone knocked on the door. An elder gave permission to enter. A messenger rushed inside and delivered news from Lycol village. The report confirmed that the forest nightmare was dead. Everyone was shocked and wanted to know how it happened. The messenger said he did not know the details. An elder quickly took the letter from him and read the report. It said that another monster had eaten the nightmare. The room fell into deeper shock. Many questioned if the report was true. The elder said that was exactly what had been written. Most believed it had to be wrong. They thought the report might be a mistake. It was hard to accept that a new threat had appeared so soon after the nightmare. Manas clapped her hands to quiet them. She told them they should confirm the truth first. She ordered the messenger to summon the person who wrote the report so they could explain everything. Anyone who had seen the monster that ate the nightmare also needed to be questioned. Since they knew nothing about this new creature, they had to hold their opinions until they gathered all the facts. Even so, their natural enemy, the nightmare, was gone. If the new monster could be harmed by magic, then it might not be a true threat to the elves. Many began to feel that peace was finally returning to Einherjar. But Manas did not see this as good news. She knew that saying so would be useless to those already lost in relief. She could not stop thinking about the creature that had defeated and devoured the nightmare. Meanwhile, Yunos regained consciousness. He felt sluggish but wondered if Diera's magic potions really worked. He looked at himself and realized he needed to wash up. After washing, he grilled some fish he had caught nearby. His appetite was back, and his body seemed to be holding up fine. As usual, there were no elves by the river. Considering the battle from the previous day, he guessed it was expected. Since his peeping duties were on hold again, he decided to focus on satisfying his hunger. He stopped by the main Imperial base, but it grew dark, so he just ate and slept, dreaming of Ashiru. The next day, Yunos wore a serious expression. He went through the graver magazines he could find. He assumed people were used to this kind of scene, but he wanted to give an excuse. The amount of smut in the store was suspiciously high. His search area was limited by his size, and it could not be helped. Since he could not find the cookbook he wanted, he settled for 7 top-tier magazines for now. If he wanted pure knowledge, a library was the better choice. He decided to hunt for a library next. He found one that was smaller than the Imperial capitals but still impressive. The building was in bad shape, so Yunos had to move carefully inside. One bump could collapse the whole place. The genres were already labeled, so he found the books he needed quickly. The books were in better condition than the building, which was a relief. As he held a book in his hands, he felt something was off, but he set that aside and continued looking for more books. By the end of the day, he had collected 7 smut magazines and 25 books on seasoning and cooking. He gathered what seemed like the right tools for making spices. However, making them was much harder than he had expected. The recipes required precise measurements, time, and effort. Even the simple ones made him doubt he could get all the ingredients. He wished the Empire still had working farms. He wondered if it would be better to depend on them surviving and head south. But there was no way the 2 southern nations would leave Imperial lands alone. Yunos knew he was repeating himself. But he had always hated the South. The Levelin Republic and the Hale Federation south of the Empire were known as untrustworthy states. They always wanted the Empire's land. When the Empire's forces focused west to fight the elves, those nations crossed the border without declaring war and destroyed towns. They surrendered in 3 months once the Empire counterattacked. But when the Empire struggled with a multi-front war, they ignored the truce and invaded again. They attacked recovering towns, killed residents, and used survivors as hostages until they were done with them. They could only be called barbarians. It was clear what these savages would do to a fallen empire. The South was lost. Yunos decided he would only go south when he was ready for a full attack. He knew looking away would not change anything, but seeing it with his own eyes could make him lose control. He could only stay sane because of the emotion control functions of his current body. He barely held it together, helped by what he could see around him. The South was only a last resort. He put the hunt for seasoning on hold. He had to be careful because malls were full of traps that made him want everything in stock. In the end, he got a little greedy and took more loot than usual. As he organized his haul, he noticed something strange. While putting the books on the shelves and flipping through the pages, he realized something important beyond just reading erotic books. He was not imagining it. Since waking up that day, he had felt a strange change. His senses seemed sharper. Normally he could not turn pages this smoothly. His body felt stronger even while running. At first he thought he was imagining things, but his abilities had clearly improved. He guessed surviving the octopus's powerful poison had made him stronger. Getting stronger after facing near death was a common comics trope, but he did not expect it to happen to him. His clumsiness had vanished, and his already strong physical abilities had skyrocketed. He truly had a high-spec body now. If the Empire deployed him like this, they would not even need the final weapon. Seeing the weak state of the elf soldiers made him think the Empire had overestimated them. He had been raised to believe elves were strong, but they did not seem so now. In Yunos's mind, he already considered entering the elves' territory. They had not even used magic on the octopus, so maybe they were hiding their true power. Still, part of him believed he could handle their magic. Another part warned him not to be arrogant. An Imperial soldier had to stay calm at all times. Yet another part reminded him he could not let things end like this. He could not abandon the surveillance mission he had volunteered for. That resolve became the deciding factor. Yunos decided to infiltrate the elves' territory. If they would not come to the river, he would go to them. But carelessness was forbidden. He was still outnumbered. Using all his stealth skills, he went to recon first. The plan was to slowly expand his area of operations. Night was the best time for scouting, so he spent the day reading magazines. When night came, he slipped into the darkness to scout. Even with his mimicry skill, Ashiru might sense him, so he had to be very careful. After scouting for a while, Yunos found some structures built into large trees. He could hear voices and realized it was definitely an elf settlement. There were normal wooden buildings at the back. He wondered where he could sleep but knew there was no need to rush. His mimicry skill had grown stronger and lasted longer now. He took a short break and planned to push further later. He returned to the spot where he had seen Ashiru. His biggest concern was her since she could sense his mimicry. He needed to find her quickly. He did not have any bad intentions toward her and asked the viewers to trust him. Soon he found another heavily guarded settlement. Being closer to the river meant higher alert levels. In the end, Yunos could not find Ashiru. He marked 2 settlements on his map thinking that would be enough for the first day, and then went to sleep. The next day, before starting his evening reconnaissance, Yunos decided to head back to the river for dinner. He was in the mood for fish. He ran happily to the river, thinking no one should be around at this time. Since the octopus monster was gone, he hoped the elves would return. Suddenly, he sensed something nearby. He looked around but saw nothing out of place. There were no strange smells or sounds either. Still, his instincts warned him that something was wrong. He realized staying in the river was risky. He needed to save his mimicry for tonight's reconnaissance, and wondered if he had made a mistake. Suddenly, someone appeared from behind a tree. Yunos was shocked. He assumed it was magic and prepared to attack, but the elf had already finished her spell and fired it at him. Yunos crossed his arms to block it, but the magic passed through him. Confused, he thought the attack might have failed. The old female elf laughed as if she had won. Yunos got angry and realized the woman must have a death wish. He tried to move forward, but a few words from her froze his body. He understood that she had used binding magic. The woman gave him orders, and his body moved on its own. She celebrated in a creepy way. Yunos could not accept it. He could not believe this old woman had done this to him. In his mind, anyone who could use manipulation magic should be a busy, beautiful elf. He wanted to protest to the author about that. But before he could, he lost consciousness and blacked out. Some time passed before Yunos finally woke up. He wondered where he was. He remembered the old elven woman suddenly controlling him. Now he could feel his body moving again. He guessed the spell had worn off. He decided not to make any sudden moves yet. He knew she had used magic to bring him to the elven settlement, but he did not know why. He hoped they were rewarding him for saving Ashiru. Suddenly, someone appeared. The elven woman seemed glad he finally showed up. Cashiel said he had his own matters and could not appear just when she called. The woman angrily asked what could be more important than the monster that had just eaten the nightmare. Yunos was confused, but somehow he could understand the elven language. He guessed it was a side effect of the spell. Controlling him was a serious crime, but for this he was honestly grateful. He decided to change how he thought of the elven woman from old bag to ma'am. Cashiel told the woman, Carisia, that he admired her passion for research, but a taboo was still a taboo. Carisia asked what could be wrong when the monster that had eaten the nightmare was so close. If it had entered the village, every elf would have been in danger. Yunos wanted to tell her he did not really eat much and certainly did not eat elves. He could only eat Ashiru in his imagination. Carisia then said the village was saved because of her research and asked for at least a word of thanks. Carisiel said the result did not matter. She had revived and used the magic of domination, which was a serious offense. Yunos was surprised to hear the name of the spell. It sounded dangerous, and he thought it made sense that the elves made it a taboo. He wanted to take back what he had said before. Carisia was immediately demoted back to Old Bag. Cashiel said her desire for knowledge had disrupted the village's order. He told her to accept her punishment. Carisia refused, saying knowledge was power. She had used it correctly and demanded why she should be judged unfairly. Yunos wanted to thank the old bag for casting such a powerful spell on him, but his ability to understand Elvish was probably because of her magic. If he killed her now, he might lose that gift. It was too valuable. He decided to let her live for now. If it had been number 8 or number 6 who had cast the spell, he would not have minded taking orders. Someone told them to calm down. The one who stepped in was Miss Elf number 6. Yunos felt happy to see her after a long time. He noticed she still looked the same. Caricia asked angrily why a daughter of the noble Fortuna line was interfering. She also questioned whether it was right to take away a creature's free will with magic, even if it was a monster. Caricia scoffed at her. She had expected this from the Harmony Committee, who always said strange things. Yunos did not expect to hear their name here. If he remembered correctly, their full name was the Natural Harmony Committee. They saw monsters as part of nature and wanted humans and monsters to live together. One member had followed their beliefs too far, attacked a goblin nest, and ended up badly hurt, becoming the subject of jokes in the Empire. Most members, however, were probably just normal elves who cared about nature a little more than others. Cashiel asked No 6 not to make things more complicated. Using forbidden magic was a sin no matter the target. He wanted to arrest Caricia immediately but could not let the new monster run free. No. 6 suggested waiting for the Council of Sages to decide. She said arguing in public would only make everyone anxious without solving anything. Cashiel had no choice but to agree. Caricia laughed at them and asked if Fortuna was siding with the Zazatos. She assumed No 6 would get the result she wanted using her body. No 6 refused and said she would not do such a thing. Yunos started imagining things about No 6. His thoughts were turning pink again. No 6 then told everyone to leave since they finally reached an agreement. Before leaving, Cashiel said he had something to tell Caricia. He pointed out that the Argos she controlled was a monster that crushed the Canaan Kingdom's army and mercenaries without a scratch. It was clearly hostile to humans. He warned her to be careful with the monster. Caricia told him to mind his own business. Yunos did not expect news about Canaan to reach this far. More importantly, he was now labeled as Argos. For now, he decided to keep pretending under Caricia's control. By staying on the sidelines, he had gotten a good read on the situation. Caricia was a mage with no political support. She was a woman driven by her thirst for knowledge. The man opposing her seemed to be from the Zazato clan and held some power. No, Yunos could not deny he had been dragged into a mess, but the chance to understand their language outweighed the trouble. The domination magic had not completely worn off yet. If he tried to resist Caricia's orders, his movements slowed. Even now, his body moved on its own. That was likely the only reason he could understand them in the first place. His top priority now was to learn the Elven language while he could still maintain this state. Once he fulfilled his purpose, Caricia would be dead meat to him.